Hello. If you clicked on this video, you probably want to know the plot of... Wait, what? Oh my god. My name is Vera, and it is my pleasure to welcome you back to the Witcher plot summary video series, where I act as your guide through the tale of Geralt of Rivia. Sapkowski's writing is so layered and complex, and especially in this book, so as we go plot point by plot point, I'll try to highlight some relevant cultural and translational insights, and give you a little bit of my own analysis. Before we get into it, I also just want to say a thank you for the amazing response to part 1 of this video series. I'm very happy that it's connecting with a lot of people. And today we will be covering The Sword of Destiny, which is book 2 of the Witcher series. Before we continue, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Skillshare. If you love immersing yourself in stories like The Witcher, whether it is through storytelling, art, filmmaking, or analysis, Skillshare has something for you. From honing your video editing skills to learning how to build intriguing worlds, their thousands of classes will help you bring your creative ideas to life in new ways. Personally, I found the DaVinci Resolve Masterclass led by Adi Singh to be a total game changer for me this year. His classes have been instrumental in helping me learn how to do effects like green screens or different types of titles, and just in general navigating the new software. And as some of you may know, I'm also a medical student, so balancing scripting, filming, not to mention schoolwork, can be quite difficult for me at times. And so I decided to partake in the Chaos to Calm Google Calendar workshop by Jules Acree, and it's helped me to manage my schedule and stay on top of projects more effectively. So if you're interested in joining this online learning community and trying some of their classes out for yourself, then be sure to click the link in description, because the first 500 people to click my link will receive their first month of Skillshare completely free. So be sure to go down there, click the link, and check it out today. And thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Alright, so back to the meat of the matter. Sword of Destiny, originally known as Miecz Przeznaczenia. This is the second book in the Witcher series, and also the second anthology in the Witcher series. Before we get into the short stories, I want to break down the structure a little bit, because once again, I think that it is important to kind of have an idea of what we're about to dive into, because big shocker, but Sapkowski is super intentional with everything that he does, and so I think it's important to understand that at a more bird's eye view scale. As you may remember, in The Last Wish, we had the frame narrative. So this was the story of Geralt recovering in the Temple of Melitele from his fight with the Striga that we see in the first short story. And this frame narrative was known as the Voice of Reason. So theoretically, the book The Last Wish was taking place in that time period of the Voice of Reason. And the short stories were kind of like flashbacks to give context a little bit to what is going on in that frame narrative. Here, there is no framing narrative. It's just short story after short story with no interludes. However, they are all in chronological order. Even though years may pass from one short story to another short story, they're still tied together thematically. There are multiple different themes and different motifs that are introduced. And the way we follow them, the way they develop, is very much reflective of Geralt and other characters, as well as the general state of the world. But the full tapestry of these multiple threads isn't revealed until the final short story called Something More. Also, before we continue, just one thing that I want to say. I had a plan for this video, okay? I wanted to wear a justa that would match the cover of the book that we're covering today, specifically the illustrated edition, and I lost it. I spent like 2 hours looking for it and I can't find it. So shout out to my friend who got me this scarf from Thailand because it kind of fits the cover. I'm so sorry that I'm not wearing that one, because I wanted to continue the theme of wearing traditional inspired clothing, but I lost it. With all that being said, I think we're ready to dive into the first short story. The first short story in this collection is translated to The Bounds of Reason. Personally, not to be a hater right off the bat, but I kind of hate this translation. First of all, I think it is quite easily mistaken for the voice of reason. However, reason is two different words in the two different titles in Polish. So the voice of reason originally is głos rozsądku. Rozsądek is the word that means reason in that case. However, here it is granica możliwości. And so możliwość is the word that is translated here as reason. I don't really think that's a good translation. I think możliwość is better translated as possibility. And in the English translation, whenever characters do talk about the granica możliwości, David French usually translates it as the limit of possibility or the limits of possibility. Also thematically, it is more clear. So back to the story. Just to jog your memory, I want to remind you that the last time that we saw Geralt, he was leaving the Temple of Melitele in Alander. That was 1 year ago. Today, it is the year 1253, and Geralt is somewhere in the Hengfors League up north, near the Kestrel Mountains. We start the book with a scene of villagers gathered around a dilapidated dungeon discussing the fate of a man who entered to kill a basilisk. They're basically saying that the guy is doomed because he didn't go in there with a mirror, which according to them is the essential method of killing a basilisk. Now, you might be thinking, Vera, I know what this is. This is obviously a reference to the tale of Medusa. Maybe, but I think that since he's killing a basilisk, this mysterious individual, no clue who he might be, there's actually a myth of a basilisk that haunted the old town square, the rynek of Warsaw. There are multiple different versions of this story, but what it comes down to usually is that he was in the basement of this inn, this pub, and he would kill the people that went down to defeat it by turning them into stone. One version of the story says that there was a boy who decided to defeat the basilisk in an unconventional way by bringing a mirror, because he was like, well, if I lift up the mirror and the basilisk sees itself instead of me, won't that mean that the basilisk will turn into stone? However, there are also other versions of this where this boy went down without the mirror, which is when his sister, who also was working in one of the stragane, one of the market displays, she was the one who kind of thought of this idea to bring the mirror down and is able to defeat the basilisk by turning the basilisk into stone. And even now, if you go to visit Warsaw, you go to the rynek, you will see a metal recreation of the basilisk outside one of the buildings. But have no fear, I've been there multiple times, and I can personally assure you that the basilisk is not wreaking havoc on the people of Warsaw anymore. Anyway, the tension keeps rising amongst the village folk because they're like, well, this guy's clearly gonna, die, so shouldn't we just steal his horse and his belongings and just get on with it? It's not like he's coming back. But that's when a stranger arrives and starts admonishing the people. The stranger is described as young, handsome, and a well-off young man. The butcher of the village is very much the one who is saying that, yeah, we should just steal the horse and get on with it. And he gets prepared to fight this stranger. However, that is when two Zerrikanian warriors, whoop, there they are, appear. And their presence really intimidates the crowd. And this is when the butcher asks the stranger if he has no knife. The stranger replies, I don't need to carry one. My weapons walk behind me, referring to the Zerrikanians. Now, there are some discrepancies as to how the Zerrikanian warriors appear throughout art, throughout time. Some parts of the lore seem to indicate that Zerrikania is inspired by Africa, and that's why a lot of the art depicts Teja and Vea as dark-skinned individuals. However, Sapkowski describes them as having light or jasne braids, which would indicate that they are blonde. And taking that into consideration, there's another group that interprets Teja and Vea as being inspired by Sarmatians or Scythians. Some of the descriptions about Teja and Vea's fighting style are kind of similar to the habits of those groups of people as well. And light hair was not uncommon. I left up both interpretations on the wall. As things are starting to escalate between the villagers and these newcomers, a white-haired man emerges from the dilapidated dungeon, and it is Geralt of Rivia. dragging along the slain basilisk. Geralt claims his payment and chastises the villagers for their behavior. They turn to go away, but the man says that the villager forgot about something, that he dared to draw a knife on him. And in response to this, the Zerkanian warrior beheads the butcher. At this point, the stranger introduces himself as Borch Trzykawki, or as it is translated to in English, Borch 3 Jackdaws. Borch invites Geralt to spend the evening with him at a nearby inn called the Pensive Dragon. Geralt says, "I'd like you to know so that there be no misunderstanding between us. I am a witcher." To which Borch replies, "I thought as much, and you said that as if you were saying I'm a leper." "There are some," Geralt replied calmly, "that would prefer the company of a leper to that of a witcher." "And there are those," replied 3 Jackdaws with a smile, "who would prefer the company of a sheep to that of young ladies. In the end, all I can do is pity them. I stand by my proposal." When they get to the Pensive Dragon, Borch orders a very elaborate meal. And as they wait for the meal, they chat. Borch specifically asks Geralt more about the role of the Witcher. He equates the role to a role of someone protecting the world from evil, from chaos. Now, this might be my bias speaking, but it's almost as if he's kind of testing Geralt to see what his moral code is. As the conversation progresses, Borch gets even more specific, asking Geralt about killing mythical creatures. He says this particularly about dragons. Borch describes them as being the epitome of evil. But Geralt reveals that he refuses to kill dragons. Borch pushes Geralt about golden dragons, but Geralt says that they do not exist. He says this kind of funny and iconic line that he's never seen a white horse with black stripes before, but he knows that they exist overseas in Ophir and Zangvavar. But then Borch pushes against this by saying, "I think that every myth, every fable must have some roots. Something lies among those roots." It does, Geralt confirmed. Most often a dream, a wish, a desire, a yearning. Faith that there are no limits to possibility. And occasionally chance. The word for chance that he uses is przypadek. Przypadek can also mean accident. But Borch doesn't let go. He keeps pushing about the golden dragons. He says that what if golden dragons are possible if a unique mutation were to occur? Geralt says that even if so, the fate of all mutants is that they differ too much to survive. Borch retorts and says that his sorcerer friend says that every being has its own continuation in nature and survives in some way or another. The end of one is the beginning of another. There are no limits to possibility, or at least nature doesn't know any. Geralt responds that that ignores the fact that mutants are sterile. Only in fables survives what cannot survive in nature. Only myths and fables do not know the limits of possibility. As they are talking, Thea and Vea are constantly giggling amongst themselves and conversing in their own tongue. They keep winking at Geralt in a way that he describes as macabre, and Borch says that Geralt has to be careful with them because they're priceless to him. Geralt totally understands that because, he's with 2 Zerkanian warriors. The word warriors in Polish that he uses is wojowniczki, the female version of warrior. And so in Zerkania, girls are trained from birth to become expert fighters. And they're some of the most lethal people in the world. So obviously he understands the value of having such companions. But Borch says that he wasn't talking about their fighting capabilities. He was talking about how they are in bed. To be honest, I am very conflicted about the depiction of Thea and Vea in the short story and the depiction of women in sort of Destiny in general. Again, not in all short stories, but in this one and in A Little Sacrifice specifically, because it is kind of male gazy. Now, I don't think this is a problem in The Last Wish. I think in The Last Wish, most, if not all, the critiques that are given to it can be attributed to the translator. But in this short story, it is there in the original text. And with Sapkowski, it's hard to say if it's there because he is critiquing this depiction of women. Sapkowski loves to play around with these genre conventions at the time, especially Conan the Barbarian, where the depiction of women in that series has been criticized a lot. There's more of this later, so I'll mention it again. At a moment where Borch is occupied, Vea tells Geralt why she is so loyal. Reason is that he is the most beautiful. Geralt is kind of confused, but he nods, thinking the criteria by which women judged the attractiveness of men, not for the first time, remained a mystery to him, which is quite funny. This concept of Borch being the most beautiful, that will come back around later. Anyway, throughout this conversation, Borch's admiration for Geralt just grew and grew. And so he arranged for Geralt to be able to stay with him overnight at the inn. This chapter ends with him saying that he ordered a tub for the four of them, and he asks Geralt which he prefers. Geralt doesn't respond, just scratches the back of his head, and Borch says that he can just decide in bed. And again, I feel like this is kind of treating Thea and Vea as objects, not as like characters. But for me, I'm able to kind of look past this and still enjoy the book. Skipping a few days ahead, the four of them are on the road when they arrive at a barricade guarded by halberdiers under King Njedamir's orders. Borch and Geralt are refused passage without a permit. But Geralt says that this is an idiotism because this isn't Cairngorm, so King Njadamir doesn't have power here. It's Bearfield, or in Polish, Hołopole. The guard says that perhaps they should just talk to the officer in charge, who is idly sketching a lewd image next to him. And who did they see beside this guard? Well, beside him, a slim man with a fanciful plume bonnet pulled down over his eyes, adorned with a silver buckle and a long twitching heron's feather, was reclining gently, plucking the strings of a lute. Does it sound familiar, guys? Geralt knew that bonnet and that feather, which were famed from the Buina to the Yaruga, known in manor houses, fortresses, inns, taverns, and brothels. Particularly brothels. And Geralt calls out to his friend, Dandelion. Please pay attention to the fact that Geralt calls out to him because he's happy to see his friend. Because unlike what Netflix would like you to believe, Geralt and Dandelion are really good friends and both of them cherish each other. It's not a one-way street. Turns out Dandelion is out here in front of this gate into Bearfield because he is also stuck without a permit. Geralt is like, well, great, this is quite the bummer. Guess we just have to journey along the river. And Dandelion is like, whoa, wait. So you're not here because of King Njadamir and the dragon? And Geralt is like, what? Which is when Dandelion starts to explain the recent events that have been happening in Bearfield. Of course, he has his lute ready, but Geralt shuts that down really fast. So what happened in Bearfield is that around a week ago, a dragon appeared and started eating the cattle. Geralt is skeptical that Dandelion is just making stuff up, but Dandelion says that he was in Bearfield for a Jarmark. And yes, this is the same word that is used in the Lesser Evil short story with the fight with Renfri. And you guys suggested that I use the word fair as a translation, like a village fair. And I think this was a really good suggestion. And he says that he saw this dragon with his own eyes. The people decided to try and poison it. The person in charge of the operation was this guy called Kozoyet, translated to sheepbagger, a master shoemaker. And he decided to use his knowledge to stuff a sheep full of sulfur and other poisons and give it to the dragon to eat. This green dragon that appeared ended up eating the entire sheep. And though the sheep didn't kill the dragon, it did injure it. It tried to retreat into the nearby Kestrel Mountains, but it was just so unwell that had to walk part of the way. A lot of villagers tried to follow it initially. It was described as having smoke coming out the front and the back end. And if this reminds you of anything, then I kind of mentioned it in the Last Wish summary video, but we have this legend in Kraków. King Krak lived in the Wawel Castle, and under the castle there lived a dragon. He ordered all the knights in the realm to come and fight the dragon, and they weren't able to. Ultimately, there was a shoemaker who, just like Sheepbagger, was able to defeat the dragon by filling a sheep with sulfur and giving it to eat. In some versions, the dragon explodes. In other versions, smoke emanates from the front and the back end, and the dragon ends up flying away. But ultimately, the shoemaker is successful in defeating the dragon. And that is not only the basis on which this story with Sheepbagger is formed, I guess, but it is also the greater story that is being retold by the limits of possibility, or bounds of reason, short story. Because let me remind you, pretty much all of the short stories are retellings of fairy tales. Hearing everything that has transpired in Bearfield, King Ndamir has set his eyes on killing the dragon. And he's doing this in order to claim the throne of Melior. In Melior, there is this princess that he wants to wed because he wants to have her children to be legitimized as the ruler. But the nobility of Melior is kind of against him, so they dug up this ancient prophecy and they said, well, actually, this ancient prophecy says that the true king of Melior, the prophesied king, would kill a dragon, yes, and bring it here, and he would be then the rightful ruler. Of course, when they did this, they didn't anticipate for there to be an actual dragon that appears in a nearby village. And King Ndamir, when he hears this, is like, brilliant. Now I can make the population love me using their words against me. Perfect. The dragon hunters that he recruited include the famous Sir Ike of Denesle, who is a knight that Geralt praises, but remarks that this guy is ruining his job because he does it for free for some higher principle, whereas Geralt has to do this stuff because he wants to get paid. Another group that you may recognize are the Crinfrid Reavers, who you have the opportunity to meet in the opening of The Witcher 2, and they are run by Boholt. Moreover, a group of dwarves led by Yarpen Zigrin are there as well. Geralt asks Dandelion what Dandelion is doing there, and he says that he wants to be there to witness a great battle that he can write a ballad about. Borch scoffs at the idea that this will be a fight and says it will be more like a pig sticking or a carcass being quartered, because after all, the dragon is already injured. Geralt says that the dragon is probably fine by now. He also predicts that the Crinfrid Reavers are probably going to be the ones to end the dragon. At this point, a guard passes by and mentions that a witch passed through the previous day. The guard believes that this certain witch will be the one that ends the dragon. And the mention of this witch sparks Geralt's interest. He asks if she was a redhead. The guard says no. He says that she was raven-haired. Oh yeah, at some point the Zeracanians were sent off to fetch beer, and at this point they return with a sorcerer called Doregarai. They try to convince the officer to let them through and trying to give him beer in return. This new sorcerer, Doregarai, says, I wonder whether you're so short of money or whether you murder endangered species for the simple pleasure of it. Geralt says that that's rich, coming from a sorcerer, especially one that was already beaten to the scene by some black-haired sorceress. And Doregarai asks if she was on a black horse. The guard says yes, and Doregarai identifies the witch that passed through as Yennefer. And at this moment, everything changes. Geralt pulls out the money that he got for the basilisk at the start of the story and gives it to the officer, and Borch adds his own money to the money that Geralt produced. The officer is still unsure, and Borch says, oh, don't mind, you can even have one of the girls as well. Once again, makes me really uncomfortable. Then the officer is like, oh gosh, but what will I say to the king when the king finds out that I let someone pass? And Doregarai sets a tree on fire and says, just tell him that you were scared. Thus, the group of now 6 gets on their horses and goes through. The scene that we have now is sometime later at this point. Geralt is talking with Boholt and the other Crinfrid Reavers, Yarpen Zigrin. The scene starts with Boholt, the leader of the Reavers, expressing surprise that King Ndamir did not dismiss Geralt and his companions from the hunt. Geralt explains that they didn't meet with the king personally, but with his steward, Gilenstjern. Yarpen Zigrin, the dwarf, chimes in at this point and mocks Gilenstjern. And what he says here, I think, is so important. When we joined the hunt, he came over, nose stuck up towards the heavens. Pooh-pooh. Remember, you dwarves, he says, who's in command, who you have to obey. King Ndamir gives the orders here, and his word is law, and so on. I stood and listened, and I thought to myself, I'll have my lads knock him to the ground, and I'll shit all over his cape. But I dropped the idea, you know, because word would get around again that dwarves are nasty, that they're aggressive, that they're sons, and it's impossible to live with them in, what the hell was it? And here, Sapkowski uses this word, coexistencia. This is a neologism, so a new word that Sapkowski makes up for the purpose of this passage. And it kind of works in both ways, because on one hand, it's showing that Yarpen isn't really educated. He doesn't really remember the exact word that Glenstierna used, but coexistencia is built from two words. So koa, which means kind of next to, and existencia, which means existence. But it's not coexistence. It's existing next to. Kind of reminds me of the Jewish ghettos that were common throughout Poland during World War II. Now, I highly suggest that you do your own research into this topic, because it is one that is so complex and so heartbreaking, and I'm not able to cover it in this video. But Jewish people would live in these ghettos, saw so many tragedies happen in World War II because of the Nazis. There was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising that was very horrific. During the Nazi occupation, very often Jews were lined up against walls and shot, or they were taken and carted off to extermination camps like Treblinka, or concentration camps like Auschwitz or Majdanek. And so this description that Yarpen gives, I think, is very reminiscent of that. In the translation, David French translates it to harmonium, playing on the saying to live in harmony, but that's not really what this passage is getting across. The point isn't that Glenstierna is okay with them living in harmony. He'd be okay with the idea of them living next to each other, but still separate, not coexisting, existing next to. The Reavers go on to question Geralt's presence there, noting that typically Witchers aren't known to kill dragons, but Boho suggests that having a Witcher can still be useful to keep them safe from other things they may encounter that they are not equipped to deal with. And no one really has a problem with Geralt's party being there other than Doregarai, because Yarpen and the Reavers dislike sorcerers. And in this, they also include the presence of Yennefer, who they keep calling a witch. They do so to be rude. Boholt and the rest speculate that Niedamir and the sorcerers and Glenstierna are working together to cheat them out of their potential earnings. They are particularly worried that Yennefer, who they think is awful, especially Yarpen. Yarpen is like the #1 person in the Yen hater squad. They think that she will just cheat all of them and steal their money. Well, Geralt asks about Sir Ike, the knight. Ike just sits there and says that he has divine orders, a divine calling to protect the people from evil. This kind of plays on the speech that Borch was giving earlier in The Pensive Dragon about, at this point, Yennefer arrives at the campfire. And of course, she is hated immediately by Yarpen. Boholt assumes that Yennefer is here to give them some sort of proposal, but he says that he will not accept a deal where Yennefer kills the dragon with magic and takes most of the money, because they actually need the money for housing and for food. Yarpen, though, just keeps making his snide remarks. Yennefer asks him if he's coming up with all of them on his own, or if it's the influence of a certain Witcher. Boholt reassures her that Geralt has nothing to do with the jabs that they keep making at her, but he also tells her that they will not accept any sort of proposal from Niedamir. They say Yennefer can relay this to the king. Yen says that won't be necessary because Niedamir already agreed to their deal. She turns away, leaving without saying goodbye. After she's left, Yarpen says that back in his day, he preferred it when sorcerers would stay in their towers and not put their asses where they don't belong. To which Dandelion turns and says to Geralt, "Hey, she can put her ass here any day, right? Ha ha ha." But then they realize that Geralt has disappeared. Geralt has gone after Yennefer. Geralt calls out to her and she turns as if surprised, but he knows that she heard his approach. Geralt remarks that she hasn't changed, and she says that neither has he. Though it is equally normal, or rather abnormal in their case, since both of them age very slowly. Yennefer challenges Geralt's presence, doubting that he is there for the expedition for the dragon, unless his stance has changed, which he says it hasn't. He asks her if she'd believe that he is there because of her. And Yennefer says, well, of course. because men like to meet with their former lovers. They like to breathe life into memories. They like to imagine that erstwhile raptures of passion give them some kind of perpetual ownership over their partner. It has a positive influence on their self-esteem. You are no exception, in spite of everything. Okay. And now let me explain this thing, because I hate the way that Yennefer is translated. I genuinely think that David French hates Yennefer because he does her so dirty in like every single scene, and it really triggers me. Because in the English, I feel like she comes off overly rude. By the way, whatever I read out, I have read over, compared it with the Polish, and kind of changed some of the translation to suit the spirit of the text better. But I feel like whenever she is translated, she comes off as being so cold and evil. Look, in Polish, it's very obvious that she's just saying stuff because she's overly defensive of herself. She was hurt. We don't know why yet, but she was hurt and she doesn't want to be hurt again. So she's just throwing stuff passive aggressively at Geralt. She's not just being rude for rude's sake. And also, I'd like you to remember that she says, in spite of everything. In spite of everything, he smiled. You're right, Yennefer. The sight of you brilliantly influences my feelings. In other words, I'm glad to see you. He's basically repeating her words back to her, but in a more flirty way. He's smiling. He knows her, and it pisses her off. So Yennefer remains cold and dismisses him and says that she's gonna go bathe, and warns him that he should leave her for the sake of privacy. She says they can be peaceful. Geralt at this point reaches out for her, calling her Yen, and she recoils in fury. She tries to visibly calm herself and asks him what he was expecting. Was he expecting a casual reunion, some gossip, maybe even rekindling of their old affair? And at this point, Geralt isn't certain if she's reading his thoughts or just making accurate guesses, because perhaps he has been thinking about rekindling their past affair, but he stays silent. Then Yen asserts that the past 4 years have changed her. She reminds him that she gave him more than she has ever given to any man in the past. They were building something together. She is furious at the idea that she can be discarded in the morning, alone, with no note of goodbye, nothing but a bouquet of violets left on the table. She says that she won't be made into a joke again. Not ever again. Not like that. So here's the context. After the Last Wish short story, Yennefer and Geralt spent around 6 months together in Vengerberg, building not only their relationship, but also just building their life together. That is until Geralt left her with no reason. And that embarrassed her. That really hurt her, because she loved him. She says in The Last Wish, "You've condemned yourself to me." And yet he still loves her. He sees her. He sees through her eyes who she truly is. He says he'll be there with her, and then he leaves her. And it just proves what Yennefer thinks about herself, but I guess more about that in the Shard of Ice. They haven't spoken in 4 years. She declares that their relationship is over. She walks away. Geralt lingers there for a moment after she is left. For some reason, he feels the urge to laugh. Like I said in the Last Wish video, what isn't said is equally as important in reading Sapkowski as what is said. And this conversation is a perfect example of that. I love that this is our first interaction with Yennefer in this book, because Yennefer is very much the focus, at least for the first half of this book. At least her relationship with Geralt is, whether she's present or not. But when she isn't present, her absence is a present that just weighs down on every single story. The next day, the group are riding in the Gestrel Mountains on the way to slay the dragon. King Nedamir and Gilenstjern are riding alongside Geralt. Gilenstjern questions why he's on the expedition, given his previous disinterest in dragons, and he says, "I've heard that it has recently become tiresome to negotiate with you Witchers. The thing is that whenever a Witcher is shown a monster to be killed, the Witcher, rather than take his sword and slaughter it, begins to ponder whether it is right, whether it is transgressing the limits of what is possible, whether it is not contrary to the codex, and whether the monster really is a monster," as though it wasn't clear at first glance, and suggests that the entire concept of Geralt's group is really weird because he has Zerkanians with him who famously venerate dragons, back where they come from. As this happens, Doregarai also involves himself in the conversation. He emphasizes the importance of maintaining the natural balance in the world and claims that killing monsters disrupts that. Yen defends the necessity of killing dragons and that it's good for humanity's survival because children not only need to be born, but they also need to be nurtured. And if dragons come and destroy a settlement, well, then they remove that ability and that space for that. Doregarai dismisses Yen's views. He tells her that the rational thing for her to do would actually be to leave the party and go have some children. Yikes. This is particularly hurtful to Yennefer, and Geralt reacts to this as well, but I want to bring in a little bit of my own analysis of Yen as a character, because I think this kind of gets to why she's so interesting to me. We find out much more about Yen the further we progress through the series, but a lot of her intrigue comes from the fact that if we see femininity on this scale of, on one side we have the woman as the mother, the caregiver, and on the other side we have the woman as the girl boss, the powerful independent leader, then Yennefer has the interesting case of she was on both of these extremes, and she is not happy with either. The conflict that inspires within her is why I find her to be so interesting. Again, we'll get into that in a few other books. As I mentioned, Geralt is not shocked that Yen reacts quite violently to Doregarai's comments, so he tries to deflect with sarcastic humor. He kind of is trying to cheer her up, trying to diffuse her anger. He jokes about being a hapless golem, continuing the joke about what is rational, what is not rational. He smiles as he says this, but then Geralt also calls her out. She wouldn't be on this mission, very much there to serve her own self-interest as well. Geralt, mind you, is still saying all of this with a smile on his face, and Yen just gets frustrated and says that she thought she could do this, but she can't, and that she can't even look at him. She rides away, and then Geralt is left with Borch. Borch asks him why doesn't Geralt just turn back? And Geralt continues the idea that he is the hapless, servile golem, and that he operates within his limits of possibility. He has to stay there because it's not possible for him to leave if Yennefer is there. He continues by saying, because I'm a wisp of oakum blown by the wind along the highway, tell me, where should I go and for what? At least here some people have gathered, people who, though they may not like me, say it to my face and don't throw stones from behind a fence. I don't have a goal to head towards. I don't have a destination at the end of the road. Borch replies, there's a destination at the end of every road. Everybody has one, even you, although you like to think you're somehow different. When Geralt asks Borch if he has a destination at the end of this road, Borch says yes. And Geralt says that, I don't know, maybe he's here because he feels a camaraderie with the dwarves, but Borch calls him out and says that it wasn't at the mention of dwarves that he suddenly decided to hand over all his money to the guard to let him into Bearfield. At this point, the group encounters a narrow bridge, and there's a debate over whether they should take the longer but less risky route or the bridge. Before they can really decide anything, a rock slide begins. Yennefer is injured during this rock slide, and Geralt runs over to help her. He takes them to the bridge while Yen casts a spell that protects them from the falling rocks. Unfortunately, as they start crossing the bridge ends up breaking and Borch is left behind them. And so they're falling until they anchor themselves into the cliff wall. Dandelion and the others that made it to the other side are trying to get a rope to throw down to help them. But Boholt says that they should just let them hang because Yennefer won't be able to hold on for long, and so it'll be better if they just let her drop and they just save Geralt. But Geralt says that he isn't going up without her, and he tries to help her get a better grasp. And then we have this exchange that I think is so melancholic but so beautiful. The bridge creaked and sagged even more. Geralt's fingers gripping the hilt of his dagger began to go numb. Yen, shut up and stop wriggling about. Yen, don't call me that. Can you hold on? No, she said coldly. She was no longer struggling but simply hanging from his back, a lifeless, inert weight. Yen, shut up. Yen, forgive me. No, never. They are about to die. They are hanging from a bridge over a cliff. And Geralt is asking Yennefer to forgive him because he doesn't want to die without her forgiveness. That's when they feel the rope come down. On top, Sir Ike declares that their mission is a holy one, and he blames their misfortunes on the presence of non-humans amongst them. And Yen thanks Ike for saving her in a way that everyone else would describe as demure and innocent, but not Geralt, of course, because he knows her better than that. Ike claims that the only reason he saved her was because she was a lady, but he hopes that she will renounce magic. And Geralt refuses to thank Ike because he points out correctly that Ike would have let him die if he was hanging there alone. Yen forces Geralt to apologize to Ike for saying that, saying that if he doesn't, then he'll just be proving Ike's point that witchers don't fit amongst humans, kind of calling back to the Gyllenstierna and Yarpen speech from before. She says that after all, he is there already for a nonsensical purpose. Gyllenstierna says, what is that purpose? They don't answer, but Yarpen and Dandelion look at each other like this. Geralt acquiesces, says sorry, and then leaves the company. Suddenly, a scout arrives, saying that a dragon has been spotted. The group rushes forward, expecting to see the green dragon, but they are wrong. They get to a clearing, and they find a golden dragon that introduces himself as Villain Tredenmirth. The dragon, Villain Tredenmirth, says that he controls the clearing. He was the one that actually sent the rock slide, and if anyone wants to use the passage to the north, shall be subjected to an honorable duel, without any fire or magic. Boholt is shocked that the dragon speaks. Yarpen remarks on his intelligence. One of the Reavers suggests that they just attack altogether, but Ike says that no, he upholds honor, and so he goes in single combat. And although at first, Ike has amazing form, Geralt remarks on Ike's skill, Villain Tredenmirth is able to defeat him very quickly. Yarpen's reaction is only Aqua. Very poignant. Yen examines Ike's injuries and determines that no human can fight the dragon, but maybe someone with the speed of a witcher could. Yen is really desperate. He asks why she cares so much about killing this golden dragon, and Yennefer says that it's because she's heard of a magical procedure that could solve her problem. He says that if he just goes and fights the dragon, she will grant his wish from before. But at this point, Geralt is so embarrassed and so tired that he just says that it's too late, that they are no longer hanging down from the bridge, and that he stopped caring about that. He expects her to respond with anger, with lightning like she usually does, but instead Yen just tries to suppress her quivering, and she slowly turns away from him. Geralt feels bad. He regrets saying that he doesn't care anymore when it's not true. He regrets the emotion that made him say it, and he recognizes that he crossed a line. He looks away and notices Dandelion glancing at them, but Dandelion quickly glances away from him as well, as if he didn't see anything. Boholt ends up mocking Ike and declares that the Reavers will kill the dragon. So Gyllenstierna asks King Nyadamir what his orders are, and the king says that his orders are to return back to Bearfield. He gives a speech that just from listening to all the conversations on the way, he realized that his goal, his destination, lies somewhere else. He already has Melior, and it's better to be feared than to be loved, so he can just force them to love him. Dandelion and Geralt talk at this moment, and Dandelion is kind of against, killing the dragon because the dragon is such a beautiful creature. And this is also the point where Geralt notices something. Around the paws of Villain Tredenmirth, he notices a little baby. So Geralt thanks Dandelion for his input and promises Dandelion that he will not. Tensions are still rising. Doregarai intervenes and tries to tell the Reavers to not kill the dragon, but this time Yennefer intervenes and attacks Doregarai, putting him out of action. And so a fight between the mercenaries, Geralt and Dandelion, breaks out. Geralt fights bravely, but is ultimately immobilized by Yen's magic, and Dandelion, Geralt, and Doregarai are all tied up, while Yarpen, the Reavers, and Yen are off to fight the dragon. But Yen tells them no, that they should leave and that she will fight the dragon. To which Yarpen says, haha, Uno reverse, no, you are not going anywhere, and thwacks her on the back of her head. To which Boholt grabs her quickly, ties her up, and especially her hands so that she isn't able to use magic. And then he unties her shirt and he says that after they're done with the dragon, they'll have their turn with her. And this is, once again, kind of uncomfortable, but not unusual for this very brutal world. Geralt, in response to that, threatens Boholt, saying that if he does that, he will never forgive him, and he'll find him wherever he goes. And then Boholt says it's time to fight. So they all fight with Villain Tredenmirth, and shocking absolutely no one, very quickly the Reavers are put out of the battle, to say it nicely. Seeing what happened to the Reavers, Yarpen yells to his dwarves that they should flee for the mountains, and the dwarves disappear amongst the rocks. Dandelion, bound in ropes, suddenly sees a group of people emerging, and it notices that it is a militia sent from Bearfield, led by Sheepbagger. And at the sight of all these people coming at him, Villain Tredenmirth sends the little dragonling over and nudges it to go to Yennefer for protection. Yen, seeing the dragonling, asks Geralt what it it is, and Geralt explains that it is a baby dragon. Velen has been protecting the green dragon's egg, and that it has hatched now. And as he's saying this, the dragonling presses up against Yennefer, and Yen sighs. Geralt comments that he thinks the dragonling likes her. Doregaray interrupts, saying that the people have attacked. At first, Velen is doing quite well in the battle, but then they throw a net over him. But when it seems that all is lost, out of nowhere, two Zerrikanian warriors emerge, and they start a slaughter. At this point, Geralt and Yen are trying to free themselves. Yen urges Geralt to burn the ropes tying her hands so that she can use more powerful magic. And Geralt says that he doesn't want to do that because he would have to use the Igni sign, which would burn her. But Yen says that she doesn't care and that he should just do it. And so Geralt does. And so Yennefer gets up and starts to use magic to turn all the people from Bearfield into different types of animals. This allows Velen to get rid of the net and go after Sheepbagger, ultimately killing him. After the carnage is over, Thea and Vea walk up to Yennefer, lifting their swords as if to slay her. But then out of nowhere, a familiar voice says that they shouldn't, that Yennefer is not to be killed anymore. They turn around, and who do they find? Well, they find Borg. Turns out that he wasn't dead at all. It turns out that Borg was actually the Golden Dragon. He announces that there will be no more killing that day. At this point, Geralt is putting a balm on Yennefer's hands as she is crying in pain, then stands up, wanting to go to Velen and talk to him. Yen stands up wincingly and says to him, "I'm going with you, Geralt." The two of them go over to talk to Borg, and he reveals that Velen his dragon name means 3 jackdaws, 3 dark birds in the dragon language, and he confirms that the green dragon was able to flee and that he was just defending the baby. Geralt calls back to their conversation before about Borg's destination at the end of the path, and Borg says yes, that the dragon baby was his destination, was to prove that even those who differ can survive together. He says that this entire situation proves the possibilities are limitless. The word that they keep saying here for destination is cel. Cel, yes, it does mean destination, but it also means goal. Purpose. There's no really word that encompasses those 3 things in English, but that's kind of what they're saying. After this, Velen says goodbye to Geralt, and then he turns to Yennefer and asks her forgiveness before expressing that it is clear that Yen and Geralt were made for each other, that they love each other, and you can see it in their faces. But he says, "Ale nic z tego nie będzie." Nothing will come of it. He isn't saying it won't work out and that he's sorry. So, why is this important? Well, I think this is one of the most misinterpreted scenes in The Witcher, because a lot of people say that the Golden Dragon tells them that their relationship won't work out. That is not at all what he is saying. This conversation comes right after he finished talking with Geralt that the dragonling was his goal, that he was proving that there are no limits to possibility. And then he turns to Yennefer, who decided to fight for him for the baby dragon. Yennefer, who was on this hunt because she wanted to fund like this magical procedure for herself, for her to be able to have a little baby of her own, someone to nurture of her own. And he says, "I'm sorry, nothing will come of it. Not your relationship won't work out." He is saying that Geralt and Yen, they will never have their own family. And she says that she knows, but she too hopes that there are no limits of possibility for her. Do you see now how I think that this is one of the most misinterpreted parts of The Witcher? Geralt then asks Velen why he chooses to appear as a human if he can choose whichever shape he desires. After all, dragons in this universe are shapeshifters. And Velen says that unlike other dragons that have an aversion to humans, he has always been sympathetic towards them. And in this moment, Velen turns back into his dragon form before their eyes, leaving Geralt and Yennefer in awe. The short story ends with Geralt admitting that Vea was right, that Velen is the most beautiful of them all.
Smoku, jesteś piękny.
This concludes the first short story in The Sword of Destiny. I think this one is very important because, yes, it is about the hunt for the dragon, but more importantly, it's about Geralt and Yennefer's relationship. This is also a fan favorite short story, so I hope that I was able to give you a little bit more. Now let's continue to a short story that is definitely not a fan favorite, but one that I think is one of the most complex ones that Sapkowski has ever written. The second short story in Sword of Destiny is A Shard of Ice, or as it is in the original language, a crossroads. This is a very complex short story. There's so much here that I think that to fully grasp what Sapkowski is doing, you first have to know what story A Shard of Ice is retelling. And the story that it's retelling is The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. I'll give you a little short summary. Basically, the story starts off with this devil that has this mirror that whenever you look into it, everything happy is turned evil. The mirror shatters and then it sprays little splinters throughout the world. That is how we meet Kai and Gerda. And Kai gets a splinter lodged into his eye and into his heart. So everything that was once beautiful to him is now awful. His friendship with Gerda as well is now turned into something evil. So he goes out to play on his sled, and that is when he is seduced by the Snow Queen to go follow her. She attaches his sled to her sleigh and they go to her ice castle. Gerda is very worried by the disappearance of her best friend, and so the story follows her as she journeys to find him, and she finds him ultimately in the castle of the Snow Queen, almost frozen up, and he is only able to leave if he puts little ice fragments, ice shards, into the word eternity. But when she sees him and hugs him, then the shard of ice in his heart melts away, as does the one in his eye, and so it is her love for him that sets him free, and they're able to return back home. Keep this story in mind as we go through. Also, in the interim between filming The Bounds of Reason and this short story, I found my chusta that I was going to wear. All's well that ends well, right? When it comes to the timeline of the next few short stories, we don't have confirmed dates of when they occur, but they do occur somewhere between 1253 and 1262. This one takes place in a land quite west of Bearfield in Kovir and Povis, specifically in this town called Eidgenvale. The story starts off with our boy Geralt fighting a tentacle monster called Zugol in the trash heap. It is a miserable battle. Geralt is covered in slime. Ultimately, thanks to his Witcher potions, Geralt is able to prevail. He sees a star fall in the sky, but he makes no wish. The dying effects of the potions, because they are poisons after all, are leaving him exhausted and acknowledging that after he has defeated the Zugol, it's just another pile of trash in the trash pile. The next scene we see is that of Geralt returning from the fight to the home that he shares with Yennefer, and Yennefer says that he stinks and he needs a shower. So Yennefer fills up the tub with seawater. Geralt grumbles that the water is cold, but Yennefer says that, magic takes her up her energy. Yen and Geralt end up talking about the Zugol, the monster that Geralt killed in the garbage heap. Yennefer notes that new mutated creatures are popping up everywhere, taking the place of the ones disappearing in nature. She mentions that Istred thinks that this is becoming a rule. Istred, or how English speakers usually pronounce it, Istred, the mention of him really annoys Geralt. Yen suggests that perhaps it's time for the two of them to settle down in a city, but Geralt mentally rejects this notion. And then Yen examines his body for any sorts of injuries from the battle. Geralt notices a bird in the room, a black kestrel. And please remember this detail because it is vitally important. He asks Yennefer what the bird is, and she says that it is a bird that she created from magic and that she needs it, but doesn't elaborate. So Geralt asks Yen if she will see Istrid in the morning, to which she says yes, and this sparks jealousy within Geralt. He says he wants to leave Eidgenvale, and Yen responds that he's been saying this all the time and they've only been there 3 days. And plus she has some things she has to go over with Istrid first. Geralt thinks that the city is having a negative effect on him. Yen asks him if he knows what Eidgenvale means. He tells her no, and so she responds that in the elven language, it means a shard of ice. Among the elves, there is a legend about a winter queen who would travel the land during snowstorms in a sleigh drawn by white horses. As she rides, she casts hard, sharp, tiny shards of ice around her, and woe betide anyone whose eye or heart is pierced by one of them. That person is then lost. No longer will anything bring them joy. They will not find peace, will abandon everything, and will set off after the queen, after their dream and love. Naturally, they will never find her and will die of longing. Apparently here in this town, something like that happened in times long lost in Twilight. Beautiful legend, isn't it? Geralt responds, elves can dress everything up in pretty words. It's not a legend at all, Yen. It's all a pretty description of the hideous phenomenon that is the Wild Hunt, the curse of several regions, an inexplicable collective madness compelling people to join a spectral cavalcade rushing across the sky. I've seen it. Indeed, it often occurs during the winter. Witcher, she whispered, kissing his cheek. There is no romanticism in you. I like elven legends. They are so beautiful. What a pity humans don't have any legends like that. Wink wink, hint hint for the people that know what happens in Lady of the Lake. Maybe one day they will. Maybe they'll create some. But what would human legends deal with? All around, wherever one looks, even things which begin beautifully lead swiftly to boredom and dreariness, into that human ritual called life. Oh, Geralt, it's not easy being a sorceress, but comparing it to normal human existence? When she finishes her speech, Geralt is already asleep. I think this passage is very important. Obviously, the Winter Queen in the Elven legend is a parallel to the Snow Queen from the Andersen tale. And here is also our first mention of the Wild Hunt. The next day, Geralt wakes up in a very bad mood. He is aggravated by many things. He is aggravated by oversleeping. He is aggravated by the fact that Yen isn't there when he wakes up. When he goes out into town, he is aggravated by how ugly the town is. He hates the injustices that he sees around the town, and it's almost as if he's only able to see the evil bits of the town. This description is very interesting. He momentarily suppressed the anger he felt inside, overcame his annoyance, and froze into a cold, hard shard of ice. He could not allow himself to become emotional. The reason he is out in town is because he is looking for the town magistrate, Herbolth. But he is stopped by this guy called Cicada, a mercenary, a very brutal mercenary known throughout the world. He is the new guard for Herbolth and says that no one is allowed in unless they give over their weapons. So Geralt gives the weapon over, but Herbolth interrupts and says that Geralt can pass. Once inside, he asks Herbolth if it is in fact so dangerous that he had to hire Cicada, and Herbolth says, well, on the contrary, it's actually very safe here because we hired Cicada. Anyway, the conversation is about Herbolth and Geralt negotiating a price for the Zoogle. Herbolth initially wants to pay Geralt very little, but they do end up settling on a higher amount, especially since Herbolth is worried that perhaps other things could grow in the garbage patch. He also actually asks Geralt if he could come back and double check in like a week, a month, but Geralt retorts that he's not planning on staying in the town for a week, much less a month. And Herbolth laughs at this, saying that he really doubts that since he arrived here with a sorceress. What was her name? Guinevere? Herbolth says that it isn't his business, but Istrid is a very important person in Edgin Vale. They really treasure their wizard. Geralt asks where Istrid is, and Herbolth gives him information on his whereabouts, suggesting that he is digging around the southern rampart looking for history in the dirt. So after this meeting, he retrieves his weapons from Cicada, and Cicada initially tries to provoke him by saying that if the two of them found themselves at opposite ends of a dark alley, he wonders which one would be able to get to the other side. But Geralt is unfazed, and he just says bye. And Cicada replies, see you later, perhaps in a dark alleyway. The next scene involves Geralt entering Istrid's study. It is a room with a lot of crazy magical artifacts, but Geralt remains unimpressed because of course he knows Yennefer, who is also a sorceress and collects all sorts of bizarre and unsettling items, including a stuffed unicorn. This is what he has to say about it. She also possessed a very expertly stuffed unicorn on whose back she liked to make love. Geralt was of the opinion that if there existed a place less suitable for having sex, it was probably only on the back of a live unicorn. Unlike him, who considered his bed a luxury and valued all of the possible uses of that marvelous piece of furniture, Yennefer was capable of being extremely extravagant. Geralt recalled some pleasant moments spent with the sorceress on a sloping roof, in a tree hollow full of rotten wood, on a balcony someone else's to boot, on the railing of a bridge, in a wobbly boat on a rushing river, and levitating 30 fathoms above the earth. Before Rhysand and Feyre, Geralt and Yen were boinking in the sky years ago, okay? Geralt passive-aggressive remarks to Istrid about his grotesque collection. And Istrid is like, well, what could possibly disgust you, Witcher? After all, you wade through filth for money nonetheless. Then the discussion shifts to Istrid's and Geralt's background. There is an interesting remark that Geralt makes here about how sorcerers and sorceresses manipulate their appearance to get what they want. So for example, Istrid looks middle-aged, he has long black hair, he looks very wise, whereas sorceresses age themselves down and try to preserve themselves as their most beautiful form, because then they can use that to manipulate people. Istrid elaborates why specifically sorcerers hate witchers. It annoys us when we see magic, a craft we were taught to treat as an elite art, a privilege of the few, and a sacred mystery, in the hands of laymen and dilettantes. That is why my confreres don't like you. Incidentally, I don't like you either. So at this point, Geralt cuts through the bullshit and says that it's not that he doesn't like him because he's a witcher, he doesn't like him because of Yennefer. And Istrid confirms. Istrid reveals that his relationship with Yennefer has recently evolved. He says that, you know, they've had a few dalliances in the past, as is common for people in their profession, but he has stopped liking that and he wants her to commit to him now. He has proposed to her and he asks Geralt to step aside at night, preferably without any warning and without leaving any message, as he has done in the past, which Istrid knows about because he was the one comforting Yennefer through her tears. After all, what is Geralt in there for? Like, he doesn't even have emotions, he's a witcher. It's just cellular memory. Geralt responds sharply that actually Yennefer's decision is her and her own, and saying maybe Istrid is a fleeting passion. I really suggest reading this exchange in full because it really shows how Istrid just doesn't know what he's talking about. If he doesn't understand Geralt, he doesn't understand Yennefer and Geralt's relationship, and so he doesn't really actually understand Yennefer at all, despite claiming he does, which we'll also see in the next chapter. Geralt concludes by saying that they both have an equal right to Yennefer, if not him having a greater right to her, because they made love last night. Well, Istrid says that actually that proves his argument because he and Yennefer made love before noon, to which Geralt replies that he's going. Istrid says, go to hell. And now, Shard of Ice chapter 5. This is the most important chapter, I think, when it comes to Geralt and Yen's relationship, or at least up to this point. It starts off with Geralt lying on their bed. He has his hands behind his head, he's staring at the ceiling, but in reality, he's looking at Yennefer, who's entered the room. How beautiful she is, he thought. Everything about her is beautiful and menacing. Those colors of hers, that contrast of black and white, beauty and menace. Yen, upon seeing his mood, tells him not to sulk and to get up. And then she starts. In order not to put you in an awkward situation, I'll answer any questions at once. You don't even have to ask. Yes, it's true that when I came with you to Aidgenvale, I was coming to meet Istrid and I knew I would go to bed with him. I didn't expect it to come out that you'd boast about it to each other. I know how you feel now and I'm sorry about that, but no, I don't feel guilty. Geralt remains silent and Yennefer asks him to say something. And what Geralt says breaks my heart. He calls you Yenna. She responds, and I call him Val. It's his first name. Istrid is a nickname. I've known him for years. He's very dear to me. Don't look at me like that. You're also dear to me. And that's the problem. Are you considering accepting his proposal? For your information, I am. I told you, we've known each other for years. He can give me support and who knows, perhaps there'll come a day when I'll need it. And above all, he loves me, I think. I won't stand in your way, Yen. Geralt saying I won't stand in your way pisses her off. She says that how dare he think that he is standing in her way? Like that's an absurd notion. If he was just standing in her way, then she would just leave him just like he left her in Vengerberg all those years ago. Or she would have removed him to some far off place with magic. He's not standing in her way. Geralt tells her not to shout and to not bring up Vengerberg because they agreed that they wouldn't talk about it anymore. He says, I don't bear a grudge against you, Yen. I'm not reproaching you, am I? I know you can't be judged by ordinary standards, and the fact that I'm saddened, the fact that I know I'm losing you, is cellular memory, echoing Istrid's words. The atavistic remnants of feelings in a mutant purged of emotions. I can't stand it when you talk like that, she exploded. I can't bear it when you use that word. Don't ever use it again in my presence. Never. Does it change the fact? After all, I am a mutant. There is no fact. Don't utter that word in front of me. Let's break this down, right? So the reason that she gets annoyed by him, by the idea that he's standing in her way, is that it's very obvious that he isn't. She loves him. And then the reason that she gets so triggered where he starts being like, oh, you know, it's just cellular memory, the atavistic remnants of the feeling in a mutant. First of all, because Yennefer knows this isn't true, like she knows him, it pisses her off and she's like, oh, Geralt, don't talk about yourself like this. But on the other hand, it's a reminder that they are both sterile, that even though they love each other, nothing will come of it, in the words of a certain dragon. And so Geralt asks Yen the one question he never dared to ask before without uttering it. Yennefer says that she's incapable of answering it. She says that twardo, firmly. She's saying it to shut the conversation down and she's not saying it harshly. Geralt insists that he knows that's not true, that he knows her too well. And Yen replies that she doesn't know, but what kind of answer is that? And obviously the question is, do you love me? But it's never said out loud. And so they fall into silence. Until Geralt calls back to the Winter Queen, I'm traveling with you, Yen, because the harness of my sleigh got entangled, caught up in your runners, and a blizzard is all around me, and a frost. It's cold. Warmth would melt the shard of ice in you. The shard I stabbed you with, she whispered. Then the spell would be broken and you would see me as I really am. Then lash your white horses, Yen. May they race north, where a thaw never sets in. I hope it never sets in. I want to get to your ice castle as quickly as I can. The castle doesn't exist, Yennefer said, her mouth twitching. It's a symbol, and our sleigh ride is the pursuit of a dream which is unattainable. For I, the elf queen, desire warmth. That is my secret. That is the most important line ever of all time, if you want to understand Yennefer, okay? Which is why every year my sleigh carries me amidst a blizzard through some little town, and every year someone dazzled by my spell gets their harness caught up in my runners. Every year someone new, endlessly, because the warmth I so desire at the same time blights the smell, blights the magic and the charm. My sweetheart, stabbed with that little ice star, suddenly becomes an ordinary nobody, and I become, in his thawed out eyes, no better than all the other mortals. And from under the unblemished whiteness emerges Aidgenvale, an ugly little town with a beautiful name. I was deprived of the ability to feel, so I wouldn't be able to feel how dreadfully vile is that vileness, so I wouldn't retreat from it, wouldn't run horror-stricken from it. Yes, I was stripped of feelings, but not utterly. Whoever did it made a botch of it, Yen. So now Yen asks him to answer her question. She pleads with him to say the word he never said to her. Also, when she's asking him, when she's pleading with him, there are ellipses. She's shy. She's unsure of what she's saying. Now she's asking for that warmth. She pleads with him to say that word, but he says no, and she asks why. You don't know why? He smiled sadly. My answer would just be a word which doesn't express a feeling, because I'm bereft of them. A word which would be nothing but the sound made when you strike a cold, empty skull. She looked at him in silence. Her eyes wide open, assumed an ardent violet color. No, Geralt, that's not the truth. Or perhaps it is, but not the whole truth. You aren't bereft of feeling. Now I see it. Now I know you. She was silent. Complete the sentence, Yen. You've decided. Don't lie. I know you. I can see it in your eyes. She did not lower her eyes. He knew. And so in this moment, something very important happens. Yen starts uttering a spell while holding his hand, using his hand to create. She creates a second kestrel. I need them both. I was wrong to believe one would suffice. ice. For there are some things which there is no way of obtaining, even by magic. And there are gifts which may not be accepted if one is unable to reciprocate them with something equally precious. Otherwise, such a gift will slip through the fingers, melt like a shard of ice gripped in the hand, then only regret, the sense of loss and hurt will remain. I am a sorceress, Geralt. The power over matter which I possess is a gift, a reciprocated gift. For it, I paid with everything I possessed. Nothing remained. I was mistaken, she repeated, but I shall correct my mistake. The lies and truth. What is truth? The negation of lies, or the statement or of a fact? Who is full of feeling which torment him, and who is the empty carapace of a cold skull? Who? Which is true, Geralt? What is truth? I don't know, Yen. Tell me. No, she said and lowered her eyes. He had never seen her do that before. Never. The bird, begotten from the touch of your hand, will tell you. Bird, what is the truth? Truth, the kestrel said, is a shard of ice. So by now you probably have loads of questions of what the heck's happening? What the heck does this mean? There are different theories upon what is happening, but one thing that is agreed upon by pretty much every theory is that if you remember at the very start of the story, Yennefer already had one kestrel. She created touching Istrid, and the kestrel is the means through which she wants to break up with him. Basically, she came to Aidgenvale to break up with Istrid, to end it with him, but then he threw in a curveball because he says, I want to marry you. And what does the Ice Queen want? The Ice Queen desires warmth. And who is offering her warmth? He loves me, ... I think. He is willing to make the explicit commitment to her that Geralt was never even able to verbalize. Koham, I love you. She doesn't say it to him when he asks her for the first time, for a very simple reason, because she's protecting herself. She is clearly still scarred from that time in Vengerberg. Why did she bring Geralt here? Why risk him finding out? Well, and if he finds it out, then the ice will just thaw his eyes out and he'll see her for who she truly is. Yennefer thinks she is unlovable, and there's something in her, this trauma, that wants to prove that she is unlovable. Like I said, she was planning to break up with Istrid, so she creates the kestrel as like a bird male. But then the conversation continues and Geralt isn't able to respond to her. It's just a word that he'd be saying. She knows the truth. And that's when everything changes. I think maybe a part of it is guilt, embarrassment, regret, perhaps. And that's when she decides to create the second kestrel. She thought that only one would suffice. No, because now she realized something, that there are gifts that you can't reciprocate with something of equal value. She is saying she has nothing equally precious to give him in return. She is the one that's cold. He is the one tormented with feelings. She is the Kai character. He is the Gerda character. Truth is a shard of ice. Truth is that Yennefer thought that she was the Snow King, but she's not. She's Kai. She is the one struck with the shard of ice, and she didn't realize it until now. And now that she's realized it, it's too late because she has nothing of equal value to reciprocate to Geralt. She was a fool. He gave her warmth, but she gave him only coldness back. In the original fairy tale, shards of the mirror turn everything beautiful into something ugly. In fairy tales, everything is so easy. Love solves all. Truth is more difficult than it is presented to us in fairy tales. And so is love. The truth is a shard of ice. And this is also the last time that we see Yennefer in this short story. Later, we see Geralt wandering around the alleyways very aimlessly until he finds himself at the southern wall next to the excavations, and he sees Istrid. When he notices Geralt, he turns to him and asks why he's there. And he asks if he made up his mind about the Yennefer situation. Geralt warns him not to get his hopes up. Istrid, serious now, says to Geralt that it's time to settle things like men. Other lovers never mattered, it was only the two of them. Geralt agrees. There must only be one left. Geralt and Yen have trouble understanding each other. There's a lot of miscommunication. I think this is one of the cases of the miscommunication trope done very well. Also kind of plays into the idea of a shard of ice. Things aren't as they seem. Two different people can walk away from a conversation with two very vastly different things. Istrid admits that he believed that Yen would naturally choose the better man, aka him, but he thinks that she has no intention of choosing, and so they must decide for her. Geralt, struggling to speak, says that truth is a shard of ice. Istrid is confused and asks Geralt what he means, but Geralt brushes it off. And so they decide to meet by a well 2 hours after sunrise the next day. Next time we see Geralt, he is sitting absent-mindedly in a tavern, and this is where Herbolth finds him. And the reason Herbolth is there, that he has heard the rumors that Geralt and Istrid plan on killing each other the next day. Geralt says it's a private matter, that Herbolth shouldn't be interfering, but Herbolth says that, yeah, they just can't afford to lose their wizard. He brings up a sum of cash, the sum that Geralt was actually asking for the Zoogle, and says that you can have this if you just leave. But Geralt refuses and insults Herbolth. He says that if Geralt is successful, he'll personally see to his torture. And Geralt is really triggered at this point, so he just slams the knife in between the fingers. Herbolth ends up leaving the tavern, shielded by his bodyguard. So Geralt is watching a rat-faced man sitting in the corner, and he's thinking how cold it is. He of the tavern, and he leaves a knife and a sack of coins. Outside in the dark alleyway, Geralt is attacked. He very narrowly manages to get away from the attackers, though his coat is torn open. The attacker is like, oh my god, a witcher? His face is illuminated, and Geralt notices that it's the rat-faced man from the tavern. And yes, I did use the Rat King face from the Barbie movies. The rat-faced man tells him that he shouldn't be involving others in his own suicide. Perhaps he should just do it by hanging himself in the stable. Geralt does not do that. He goes to sleep in a stable. He wakes up the next day before sunrise. He is still sore from his injuries. He sees a black cat and he tries to do the psh, 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 to get the cat to come close to him, but as we know, cats and children don't really like Geralt. Suddenly he is flanked by Cicada and many of Cicada's men. Cicada mentions that he wants to fight Geralt, not for her both, not for Istrid. He cannot rest without knowing who is better. This is kind of like a parallel, I guess, to Istrid, because, you know, Istrid is competing with Geralt for who is the better man for Yennefer. Cicada parallels that by being who is the better fighter. But Geralt refuses to engage. He walks away. Then Cicada tries to spit at Geralt. Geralt is not having it and punches him, brutally smashing his mouth. And as Cicada collapses, his other companions disperse because they don't want to fight a pissed off witcher. So he continues on and he does find Istrid by the well, but more surprisingly, Istrid is there with a sword and with a black kestrel on his shoulder. Istrid greets Geralt very bitterly and says that Yennefer tried to prevent their duel, but he insists that Yennefer's rejection is not final. Geralt is still puzzled. Something feels off. He's like, Istrid, you're a sorcerer. Why is a sorcerer, a powerful sorcerer at that, here wanting to fight me, a witcher, with a sword when I am the sword's master? And that's when he realizes that Istrid, he intends to lose. Confronted with this, Istrid becomes very agitated and he reveals the contents of the letter that he received via kestrel. Farewell, Val. Forgive me. There are gifts which one may not accept, and there is nothing in me I could repay you with. And that is the truth, Val. Truth is a shard of ice. So important. There is nothing in me to repay you with. Do you see how that's different to what she said to Geralt? I'll spell it out for you a little bit later. The gift that she cannot repay is obviously the proposal. But Istrid refuses to believe this letter. He loves Yenna. But hearing this, Geralt finally understands. He understands the futility of this. He simply decides to walk away. As Istrid angrily shouts after Geralt, Geralt advises him not to drag others into his side, advising him hang himself in the stable if he really wants to. And then Istrid just keeps yelling, saying that he will never let her go. He will chase Yennefer everywhere, even to the end of the world. But Geralt doesn't respond and walks away without looking back. He doesn't care. His mind is on the black kestrel, wet from the rain, which he knows is waiting for him back at the inn. He is desperate to read the note, but he already knows what the letter will say. He knows it because Yennefer already told him what is in the letter, that she has nothing inside of her of equal value that she can give him, as Geralt gave her. Do you see how that's different from her just saying there's nothing in me to give to you, which is what she says to Istrid? To Geralt, she has nothing of equal value. She knew that she needed a kestrel. She just doesn't expect needing both, because her goal was never to break up with Geralt. Her goal was to break up with Istrid. But after her realizations, she couldn't bear to be with Geralt. And so she vanished because the truth is a shard of ice. Okay, so this is the end of the short story. I think this story reveals so much about how Yennefer sees herself, how Geralt sees himself, and why at this point they just don't work together. And it's heartbreaking. Fortunately, the next short story that we continue on to is much lighter in tone, and it is one where we meet a lot of fan favorite characters and are introduced to a fan favorite setting. Welcome to the third short story. This one is titled Eternal Fire, or in Polish, Wieczny Ogień. This is another one for which we don't have a date. We know that it happens after a shard of ice, but it happens in a place that we know very, very well and we love. We travel down south from Aidgenvale all the way to Redania, to a little port city that you may have heard of, Novigrad. This is not one that I think has a specific short story or fairy tale that it is retelling. I think that with the ones where it's, you know, the two-man show of Dandelion and Geralt, Sapkowski just likes to have fun with the boys, so the boys are back in town. The Eternal Fire short story starts off with a scene that is in fact very fire, with a certain lass throwing pots and pans out the window from her balcony at a certain poor bard down below called Dandelion. And who is this lady? Well, it is Vespula. You can meet her in The Witcher 3. Anyway, Geralt is hearing this commotion and is like, oh my god, what the heck's happening? Dandelion is pleading his innocence. He's saying that Vespula, I was faithful. But Vespula continues to insult him and retreats back inside to her house, trying to find more stuff. This is also kind of, you know, playing and mirroring on A Shard of Ice, I think, just, you know, sequentially. At this point, Geralt approaches and greets his best friend, Dandelion. Their greeting is interrupted by Vespula, who has returned and is throwing more stuff, and she throws down a pair of colorful pants, and Dandelion's like, girl, these aren't even mine. Before throwing his beloved loot, he is so distraught over this that he says that the relationship is over. As Geralt and Dandelion walk away from the balcony, Dandelion laments about the double standards that somehow Vespula is allowed to have lovers and he is not. So he suggests that to calm his nerves, to welcome his friend Geralt in town, that they should go to the Spearhead Inn. The Spearhead Inn is also near the Church of the Eternal Fire. Dandelion asks Geralt why he's in Novigrad. Geralt says that, well, his coat jacket has been ripped up recently, but Dandelion says that he's in Novigrad. This is the capital of the world. There's so much more here. There are boats, there are churches, there are riches, there's a brothel called the Passiflora. Dandelion, in fact, feels so inspired by the city that he just wants to compose a ballad which he wants to call Winter. The air bears autumn's cool scent, our words' intent seized by an icy gust. It must be thus. Nothing can be changed anymore by the crystals forming on the tips of your eyelash. Around your house, now white from frost, sparkles ice on the pond and marsh. It must be thus. Change won't happen anymore, with the longing hidden in your grieving eyes. This ballad sure sounds familiar. Do you see now how, like, even though these stories aren't, plot point by plot point, thematically, everything continues, and even when Yennefer isn't in the story in this book, her phantom still is. And this actually prompts Dandelion to ask Geralt, what's up with Yen? And Geralt says, nothing is up with Yen at the moment. Anyway, they enter the inn, and inside, the innkeeper reminds Dandelion that he has an unpaid tab. Dandelion is like, right, Geralt, money please. But Geralt is like, Dandelion, I'm also broke. Then they learn that a wealthy halfling, Dainty Bibervelt, Dandelion's like, yo Geralt, do you know Dainty? Well, you're about to get to know him. So the two bros head on back to the back of the inn. As they approach, Dainty seems to be a bit jumpy, especially when he notices Mr. Geralt of Rivia. Dandelion is like, whoa, Dainty, are you scared? Do you have the hiccups? I can help you, I can scare you. Imagine your wife Gardenia just showed up. Geralt apologizes for teasing. Dainty correctly guesses that Vespula finally threw Mr. Dandelion out. Dandelion is offended and he's like, I won't discuss delicate matters without eating some food first. So Dainty offers to buy them a zupka cebulova. The innkeeper and the serving girl have some apprehensions because of who Geralt is, but Dandelion is like, no, don't worry, we're here for leisure, not for work, and to fix the coat. Dandelion immediately is, fun, we should go to the Passiflora, we're gonna have so much fun. But Dainty is like, I can't go because I'm a halfling and they're not gonna let a halfling into such a prestigious establishment. After saying that, he's like, well, good to see you, gotta go, people to see, places to be. But then in a shocking change of circumstances, someone enters the door, someone looking very roughed up, but quite familiar. It is in fact another Dainty Bibervelt. And this Dainty Bibervelt is triggered, lunges for previous Dainty Bibervelt and calls him a thief. A fight ensues. First Dainty turns into an ugly monster version of himself. He tries to get away, but Geralt catches him. The innkeeper, his inn is very close to the Temple of the Eternal Fire, and he doesn't want to be caught with any monsters. He's like, what is going on? We're gonna call the guards because this is no bueno. But Geralt says, no, don't worry, I'm a witcher, I caught the monster, everything's fine. They go back to the alcove at the back of the inn with fake Dainty being tied up. Dandelion, it takes a while for him to realize the creature was impersonating Dainty. Geralt says that the creature is a mimic, but the creature corrects him, saying that it is actually a Doppler, and his name is Peliko Lungrevnik Letorte. In short, called Penstock, or friends call him Dudu. He is changing multiple times throughout the story, his appearance, but I'll mention it whenever he does. Anyway, Dainty is enraged. He's like, yo, Doppler, where are my horses? The innkeeper, upon seeing Dudu, is like, what is that? And Geralt says, well, that's a Doppler. But the innkeeper is like, not in this establishment. Actually, we're gonna call the guards. We're gonna turn him in. The Doppler is pleading for mercy. Do you know what the Eternal Fire Priest will do to me? And the innkeeper says, yes, you will probably have an exorcism performed on you, and then you'll probably be baked in clay and metal shavings. Dainty is like, yeah, whatever, where are my horses? The Doppler hesitates for a second, but then is like, I sold them. So Dainty recounts how he was taking the horses from Novigrad to a nearby market when they stopped for the night, and at night he woke up because he needed to take a leak. When he was ambushed by the Doppler, who perfectly copied his form and knocked him out, threw him in a ditch, and in the morning when Dainty awoke, the Doppler was gone. And so were his horses and all of his stuff. He had a terrible time journeying all the way back, and he was cursing his hired hands for failing to recognize this imposter. But Geralt explains that Dopplers not only mimic, the skin, the appearance, they reconstruct them like on a cellular level. Dandelion is like, what the heck? I can't believe that I didn't recognize my friend for days. Dainty is disgusted arrested, but asks them to check for his coin purse. And they do, but there's far less money in it than Dandelion was expecting. He implies that either the Doppler undersold the horses or has just been spending the funds. Geralt is asked whether Dopplers are aggressive and says that no, not really. They usually do this as a defensive measure, but Dainty is like, oh, I'll show you aggression. Being robbed and thrown into a ditch is definitely a sign of aggression, wouldn't you say? The innkeeper is there and he's like, yo, Geralt, you're a witcher. Just you kill monsters, kill the monster. But Geralt says that he kills monsters, not intelligent beings. At this point, the innkeeper and serving girl are like, guys, you gotta be quiet because you're gonna scare away the other guests. So they slowly untie Dudu so he can change back into his Dainty disguise. Dainty is offended and says that, well, clearly he wasn't able to copy me exactly, because if he did, he would have been making intelligent business decisions. And he angrily asks how much did the Doppler make per horse. And the Doppler says that he got 130 crowns by selling them directly to the port to a fur trader in need of fast transport. Because, it's a city, you don't really ride horses. He had a monopoly, so he could decide the price. He then reinvested the money into different things, such as cochineal dye, wax, string, mimosa bark. And Dainty is like, sorry, you did... What? Geralt, can I have your sword? Because I need to do something with it. As this happens, a city official, a tax collector called Schwan, enters, and he's like, Dainty, you've been making some interesting business decisions recently, but you forgot to pay your tax on that. Pay up. This causes quite the commotion. The Doppler is able to escape. He runs out into the city, and Dainty says, I'm so sorry, that was my cousin, Nutcase Bibberwald. Schwan is kind of suspicious, but he's still like, Dainty, you need to pay your tax. And Dainty is like, no, you don't understand. I've only done losses, no gains. And Sean is like, no, I don't care. You owe us 1,553 crowns and 20 coppers. Schwan goes away and Dainty says, well, should anyone need me, look for me in the dungeon. Later on in the day, Geralt, Dandelion, and Dainty are sitting by a fountain. Dainty is lamenting that he has to pay by noon the next day. He's insisting that they need to find the Doppler. Also, something to note is that the way they are coping with this is, as they're sitting on the fountain, they're eating racuchy, which are these Polish apple pancakes. They're so good. If your grandma makes them for you, it's literally the best day of the week. Dandelion jokingly asks Dainty, what if he would dress up as a sheep? Leave Novigrad disguised as a sheep, they would help him. But Dainty is like, oh, shut up. And so Dainty asks Geralt if he has any ideas for what might help in catching the Doppler, but Geralt says that it might be nearly impossible in Novigrad. He asks Geralt, what about tracking? Is there some magical tracking that Geralt can do? And Geralt says, yeah, but only if the Doppler is in his true form, which is highly unlikely. And not only that, there's so much background magic in Novigrad that it would just be so hard to pick up any sort of signal. Dandelion, he makes a joke about what if they just make a wish on the golden fish that are found within the little fountain that they are sitting on. Dainty wishes for the Doppler to be hit by something falling from the sky. Dandelion wishes for inspiration for his ballad, and Geralt says that he wishes that the fact that they are surrounded is just a miscommunication, because as they were chit-chatting over the fake golden fish that were actually red, they became surrounded by a certain man with the signs of the eternal fire on his outfit. It is Chappelle, head inquisitor of the Church of the Eternal Fire. Resistance basically means death. As he approaches, Chappelle says that it's quite the funny trio, a witcher, a bard, and a halfling, that are having a friendly reunion in the middle of Novigrad. He informs them that a certain innkeeper said his inn was being haunted by a vexling, which is another name for Doppler, the name that the innkeeper uses. The innkeeper said that they were consorting with this. As he's talking, the temple guard get closer and closer. They're holding these weapons called lamias. Super painful. They're outlawed in many places due to their brutal effects. But Chappelle says that, of course, he dismissed the accusations because obviously vexlings, they don't exist. And for spouting such heresy, he had the innkeeper locked away and tortured at Novigrad, the city that is surrounded and encased by walls in which multiple of the eternal fires burn, that a vexling would be able to get past this holy defense, just suggesting it as heresy of this heretic incident. He urges them that they must leave the city, but also reminds them that Dainty has some taxes to settle at first. At the end of their conversation, Chappelle calls Geralt over to him, and Geralt is a bit wary. He says, but Chappelle inquires how much Geralt would charge to capture a vexling if one were alive and loose. Geralt refuses to name a price. Hunting a creature in a city like Novigrad that is so crowded would would probably endanger multiple lives more than it would save, especially given non-malevolent nature of Dopplers. But Chappelle presses further, saying that, well, really the payment would be that Geralt and his friends could be able to leave the city alive. Geralt acknowledges this implied threat, but says that, well, there's no point in speculating, they'll just have to test it out in real life. Chappelle acknowledges Geralt's stance and decides not to escalate further. Chappelle says something very interesting that he believes in, that the eternal fire is in all of them, that this internal fire is hope, and he hopes that they don't come into conflict again. After Chappelle leaves, Dandelion is visibly shaken, and no, Chappelle is the head security administrator in Novigrad, and that he is responsible for numerous disappearances and tortures. But Dainty dismisses Dandelion's concerns because, you know, Dandelion is a bard, and bards have this tendency to get out of everything alive. I think it's also a thing in D&D, right, that the bard always survives. But in general, they all agree that they should be careful. As they turn to walk away, they see someone racing after them, and, you know, Dandelion is immediately in panic mode. He's like, oh my god, not another person. But Dainty recognizes this person, another merchant called Muskrat. He's out of breath. He is shocked that he wasn't arrested, but not for the reasons that Dainty first thought. Muskrat says that Dainty should stop playing dumb, and that the entire city knows about his dealing with cochineal dye. And Dainty is like, what are you talking about? Muskrat is like, well, we know that you bought the cochineal dye at a low price, and now you have like all of it. Muskrat reveals that obviously there was a political coup up in Povis, where the ruling faction, the Rid faction, whose color was blue, has been replaced by the Thysanids, by Estera Tyson, whose color is red. So now everyone wants to buy cochineal red dye, and no one can get any because Dainty has the monopoly. He thought they were friends, that they could do some business dealings together, but no. Dainty went behind his back and he bought all the red dye all for himself. Angry and resentful, Muskrat denounces him, leaves, and Dainty is left like, okay, well, the only place that can confirm what is actually going on with my finances is my old friend Vima Vivaldi in the Vivaldi Bank. They are in the bank, and Vivaldi invites them to his office. As they sit down, he tells Dandelion that truthfully he imagined him to look a little bit differently, just like from knowing his ballads. I imagined you quite differently, and I know your songs. I know them. I've heard them. About Princess Wanda, who drowned in the river Dupa because no one wanted her. And this is kind of twofold, because on one hand, this is referring to the Polish legend of Princess Wanda. She, in some versions of the story, is the daughter of King Krak, the same ruler of Kraków who was the one from the story of the Wawel dragon. But whether in the version she is his daughter or not, the story is that she was a princess who was so smart and so beautiful and so intelligent and known as a just ruler that a German prince wanted to marry her. And she was like, no. The prince didn't take no for an answer, and so he said that if he can't have her, he will invade Kraków. And Wanda, because she loved her country and she hated the German prince, she was like, screw you, I'm gonna throw myself into a river so that you can't have me, the Wisła. And she is found somewhere downstream. To honor her and her sacrifice for the country, there is a mound erected there called Mound of Wanda, and you can see it even today. And it actually has a very interesting history because during World War II, it was used as a place for storing artillery. The second part of it, River Dupa, is, well, Dupa in Polish means ass, so yeah, well, that's why Dandelion is offended, and the next thing that he tells Vivaldi is that, well, he wasn't the one to write such an awful ballad. Dainty redirects them, and Vivaldi reminds Dainty that he was warning him about investing into things like rancid fish oil and other worthless goods, and was warning him of high storage costs for all this stuff, but Dainty didn't listen. He is like, yeah, I'm sorry for my mistake, but Vivaldi shifts to a different topic, the selling of mimosa bark. Dainty is like, what are you talking about? And so Vivaldi informs him that an hour ago, the prices for mimosa bark skyrocketed, and the only person who invested in mimosa bark was Dainty. And Dainty tells Vivaldi that he won't believe him, but he has to assume that he has no clue what's going on. And so he asks Vivaldi to recount all events that have transpired. Vivaldi explains that Dainty deposited 1,000 crowns and took a 2,520 crown promissory note without warranty. The next day, Dainty requested a 3,500 crown letter of credit to be opened in Vizima, the capital of Temeria, and that the beneficiary should be Truffle. But this time when Dainty hopefully is like, and this one's also without a warranty, Vivaldi is like, Dainty, I like you, but not that much. At this point, Dainty is freaking out because, great, my father will disown me because I just lost his mill. But Vivaldi says, no, don't worry. I already tore up the agreement because you made enough money thanks to the Tyson rebellion. And moreover, because of the recent trouble in Temeria, as of yesterday, Druids and the Dryads pressured the Temerian king into putting a ban on all cutting down of Temerian oaks. Since that is no longer a resource available, Dainty, or rather Dudu, bought all the shipments of mimosa bark, obviously the new tanner of choice. Vivaldi tells Dainty that he has 21,969 crowns and 5 coppers after taxes. Yes, after taxes, because Vivaldi already paid Schwan off. But Dainty remains unsure if the money will actually be received. Vivaldi is confident and he asks Dainty why, and Dainty says that, well, Chappelle is investigating him. Vivaldi speculates that, well, the information that Dainty has to be able to make these amazing purchases is very politically sensitive. Vivaldi even suspects that maybe the three of them were working together. Perhaps Dandelion is a spy in royal courts, Geralt the muscle, and Dainty the merchant. Geralt denies being in business with Dainty, and Dandelion insists that he is a poet, not a spy. Vivaldi says that he believes them, and by the way, it might all just blow over because Chappelle had one of his health attacks a while back and has since changed. Besides, the church wants to build more altars, and so that is their focus. Suddenly, a creature bursts in and says that Bibervelt orders them to buy pots, no matter the size, as many as possible, and Dainty is annoyed again that someone is buying stuff in his name. But it is from this creature that we learn that the fake Dainty is in the Western Bazaar. Dainty says, great, let's go there, and I'm gonna take a thick club to get this all over with. Vivaldi, not really understanding still what's going on, says that, well, he could provide a club for Dainty, but man, that sure is a weird business practice. Before Dainty can respond, another creature bursts in and says that everything is ready and if he should start pouring. And Dainty, not knowing anything, just says, yes, pour everything immediately. Vivaldi, bewildered, demands to know what is being poured, and Dainty says that he has no idea, but that business must flow. Later on in the Western Bazaar, we have our trio. They're looking for the Doppler Dudu. As they're walking through the bazaar, Geralt recognizes a certain blonde woman with a pan and decides to walk the other way until he bumps into Dandelion, who is singing his little tune on the lute. And Geralt scolds him for playing instead of looking for the Doppler, but also lets him know that Vespula is nearby, so he might want to get off. Suddenly, as they're talking, Vespula charges at Dandelion with her pan. So Dandelion leaps off the stall that he was on and runs away. All this is set aside where Dainty bursts past Vespula and tells that he spotted the Doppler. So Dainty and Geralt give chase, and the Doppler manages to escape first by diving into a sheep pen. Dainty gets kind of detained by the sheep, but Geralt continues. He uses Ard to blow over a tent that the Doppler was trying to get into, but is unable to do the same with the next one. And so the Doppler goes into a tent and Geralt follows him. Then he has nowhere left to go and he is cornered by Geralt. The Doppler begs Geralt to leave him alone, but Geralt says that he's been causing trouble, not only assaulting Dainty, but also wasting his money. And he says that he has to leave the city either willingly or by force. Then Teleco turns into Geralt and draws Geralt's sword, mirroring his actions exactly. He boasts that he can defeat Geralt because he has now become Geralt, but Geralt disagrees. No, the Witcher countered, you are not. And do you know why? Because you're a poor little good-natured Doppler. A Doppler who, after all, could have killed Bibervelt and buried his body in the undergrowth, by so doing gaining total safety and utter certainty that he would not be unmasked, ever, by anybody, including the halfling's spouse, the famous Gardenia Bibervelt. But you didn't kill him, Teleco, because you didn't have the courage, because you're a poor, little good-natured Doppler whose close friends call him Dudu. And whoever you might change into, you'll always be the same. You only know how to copy what is good in us because you don't understand the bad in us. That's what you are, Doppler. Which is why, Geralt continued, you will now turn back into Bibervelt and hold your hands out to nicely be tied up. You aren't capable of fighting me because I am what you are incapable. You're absolutely aware of this Dudu because you took over my thoughts for a moment. I just find it so sweet that Geralt calls Dudu as his friends do. After hearing this speech from Geralt, realizes that ultimately Geralt is right. So instead, he turns into Dandelion, hat with the feather and all, and says, I prefer being a beggar in Novigrad to being a Doppler in the wilds. Novigrad owes me something, Geralt. The building of a city here tainted a land we could have lived in our natural form. We have been exterminated, hunted down like rabid dogs. I'm one of the few to survive. I want to survive and I will survive. Long ago, when wolves pursued me in the winter, I turned into a wolf and ran with the pack for several weeks and survived. Now I'll do that again because I don't want to roam about through wilderness and be forced to winter beneath fallen trees. I don't want to be forever hungry. I don't want to serve as a target practice all the time. Here in Novigrad, it's warm. There's grub. I can make money, and very seldom do people shoot arrows at each other. Novigrad is a pack of wolves. I'll join that pack and survive. Understand? Geralt nodded reluctantly. You gave dwarves, halflings, gnomes, and even elves the modest possibility of assimilation. Why should I be any worse off? Why am I denied that right? What do I have to do to be able to live in the city? Turn into a she-elf with doe eyes, silky hair, and long legs? I'll survive anyway. I know how to. As a wolf, I ran. I howled and I fought without others over a she-wolf. As a resident of Novigrad, I'll trade, weave wicker baskets, beg or steal. As one of you, I'll do what one of you usually does. Who knows? Perhaps I'll even get married. Yes, as I said, I'm going. And you, Geralt, will not even try to stop me because I, Geralt, knew your thoughts for a moment, including the ones you don't want to admit to, the ones you hide from yourself. Because to stop me, you'd have to kill me. And the thought of killing me in cold blood fills you with disgust. Teleco moves towards the exit of the tent, expecting Geralt to attack him, but Geralt doesn't, so he thanks Geralt and leaves him. Geralt says farewell and, calls him Dudu, just like his friends. Right before he disappears into the crowd disguised as Dandelion, he turns back and finishes the ballad that Dandelion was composing at the start. Spring will return. On the road the rain will fall. Hearts will be warmed by the heat of the sun. It must be thus, for fire still smolders in us all. An eternal fire which we call hope. This is at one time a callback to the conversation that Geralt had with Chappelle about the hope, the eternal fire in us all. But in some ways, since the start of this poem was, a pretty direct retelling of A Shard of Ice, if we kind of continue the train of thought in that direction, well then this can be interpreted to that hope for the relationship, the hope that something will come of their relationship, calling back to the golden dragon. Dudu also tells Geralt that he should repeat to Dandelion that winter is an awful name for a ballad, and that instead he should call it eternal fire. However, as Dudu is ready to disappear, Vespula shows up and whacks him on the head with the frying pan, causing him to lose control of his transformation. So Geralt quickly jumps and wraps the unconscious Doppler so that people don't really notice what the commotion is. And at that point, real Dandelion arrives, causing Vespula a huge shock. Unfortunately, then Chappelle arrives and orders the crowd to leave as he confronts Geralt, Dainty, and the Dandelions. However, Dudu quickly reacts and copies Dainty's form perfectly. And Dainty says that there is no problem here, that, they found his cousin, Dudu Biberveld, and names him his official business partner in Novigrad. At this point, we also find out that Chappelle actually is also a Doppler. The real Chappelle died of a heart attack 2 months ago, and that is why he's been overall much nicer, as Vivaldi said. Just as they're finishing this conversation, a gnome arrives announcing massive profits, and Dudu shows off his skill by calculating just how much money they made. Chappelle warns him of taxes, but Dudu says, no, this isn't taxed because this is for a holy purpose. Basically, the reason why he was buying the oil and the ropes was that if he mixed that with some of the excess cochineal dye, then he would produce beautiful red candles in the color of the eternal fire. And since the priests are expanding the worship in the city, well, they sure need red candles, don't they? After all, priests were short for vigil lights, and now they aren't. So Chappelle acknowledges the cleverness. Dandelion laments that he doesn't know how, but Dudu in the span of 3 days has made more money than Dandelion in his entire life. While Geralt was chasing after Dudu, he managed to rip up his new jacket that he got in Novigrad, and so Dudu offers to repay Geralt for the destroyed second jacket. The story ends with Dandelion suggesting to the group that they should celebrate the profits in the Passiflora, just as he's been pushing for since the beginning. Dudu and Dainty, however, are like, well, we're halflings, they won't let us in. But Chappelle steps in and says, no, do not worry. If they don't let you in, I'll just accuse them of heresy. They all laugh at that and decide to go to the Passiflora. And that concludes the story of the Eternal Fire. This story does a great job of building out the culture in Novigrad. I also think it is the most comedic story out of the first and second book in The Witcher. Novigrad in the books is even bigger and better than the one that we get in the game, but I really do love the one that we get in the game, and they kind of used Gdańsk to be a model for at least the ports in the city. That's all for this story, but now from this port city we will be journeying south to a fishing kingdom where a certain prince is having trouble with a certain mermaid. The fourth short story in The Sword of Destiny is called A Little Sacrifice, or as it was originally in Polish, Trochę Poświęcenia. Once again, we don't know the exact date of the events, however we do know that they are after the Eternal Fire, and we know that we are in the seaside kingdom of Bremerfurt. We start this story with one of the most iconic chapters ever, I think. Basically, Geralt is acting as couples therapy for a certain mermaid and a certain prince. Aglovale is having trouble communicating with his beloved Shinaz, who is a mermaid, but Prince Aglovale can't speak the mermaid tongue, and Shinaz doesn't speak the common tongue. And so currently Geralt is on this ship and he is relaying to Shinaz that Prince Aglovale wants to marry her and she does not want to do that. Aglovale is very frustrated with Geralt. He says, "Have you explained that I loved her, that I cannot imagine life without her, that I want to wed her, only her and no other?" Does this kind of sound familiar? Does it remind you of a certain character that we may or may not have met a few short stories ago? This conversation is leading nowhere, and so Aglovale orders the ship's captain to throw the nets and to capture Shinaz. Geralt is like, "Bro, what are you doing? Do you want to marry her or do you want to capture her?" It's interesting because in Polish we have two words that mean to marry someone. So you can either żenić się if you are a man. That comes from the word żona, which means wife, or the woman equivalent of that is to wyjść za mąż, from the word mąż, which means husband. And so when Geralt says, "Do you want to ożenić się?" in Polish it reads more as Geralt saying, "Do you want to have a partnership with her or do you want to own her?" Well, Aglovale wants her to turn into a human. He tells Geralt to tell her that he has a potion through which in 3 days she will be able to grow legs and that only minimal pain would be required. Shinaz, through Geralt, responds that, well, she knows a sea witch that is able to do the same transformation, you know, in reverse, and it would require no pain at all. Aglovale is outraged at this. He is the prince and also he's not able to live underwater, but Shinaz says that his reasons are weak and love requires a little sacrifice. Here I want to touch upon the title. I don't think the translation is bad. I think it's fine, but something that I do want to clear up is that it's kind of like a throwaway line, like a saying that we use, like, "Oh man, can't you just give a little bit of sacrifice?" It's something that you say when you're exasperated. Shinaz's been going out on the rocks, drying under the heat of the sun, scratching her tail up against the rocks and destroying her fish scales, and he won't even sacrifice his legs. She says that love is not just a matter of taking, but there has to be an element of giving. Well, she does want to have little Fry with him, but where would she be able to lay her eggs? In his hat? No, she needs a triton. Aglovale repeats his demand for the net, but the captain refuses, fearing a kraken. Anyway, Shinaz is losing her patience and she says that she requires a true triton, not a four-armed parody of a starfish. Geralt translates this but tries to make it a bit less vulgar, but Aglovale kind of gets the message and he's pissed anyway, calling her a cold mackerel and telling her that she should find a hake. This is way better in Polish because in Polish words have gender, and so mackerel, zimna makrela, that's a feminine word, and hake is dorsz, that's a masculine word, so it's funnier in Polish. So she asks what Aglovale said and Geralt just says that Aglovale still refuses to grow a tail, and so Shinaz is like, "Well, screw him, he can go and dry off." And then Aglovale is like, "Geralt, what did she say?" And Geralt says, "She told you to drown." A little bit later, we're back on land with Dandelion and Geralt talking, and Dandelion is lamenting that he wasn't able to be there on the boat and was a mermaid because he's wanted to write a ballad. This is what he said: "In my ballad, the mermaid will sacrifice herself for the Duke. She'll exchange her fishtail for slender legs, but will pay for it by losing her voice. The Duke will betray her, abandon her, and then she'll perish from grief and turn into foam. When the first rays of sunshine, who would believe such nonsense?" "It doesn't matter," Dandelion retorted. "Ballads aren't written to be believed. They are written to move their audience." Dandelion is obviously referencing the Hans Christian Andersen version of The Little Mermaid. As you can see, Sapkowski is really on a Hans Christian Andersen kick. Anyway, Dandelion asks Geralt if he finally got paid because, let's say it all together, say one thing of Geralt of Rivia, say he is always broke. But Geralt says no because Aglovale wasn't happy with the result of the couples therapy. Dandelion apologizes to Geralt and says that it's not his fault at all. Of course, Geralt is not angry at all because, you know, Dandelion was just doing a nice thing when he insisted that they go to the certain fair and spend all their money on szaszłyczki and pierożki. Geralt went along thinking maybe he'll find a good job at. Totally wasn't Dandelion's fault when he started making rhymes, saying that, "Do you want to be something dumb? Well, become a forester." This caused a brawl. They decided to flee because the foresters are known for their very mutilating arrows. But no, it totally wasn't Dandelion's fault that they lost their money. So they fled to Bremerwood, hoping to find work. Suddenly, they hear a voice shouting for the master, and they see that they are being approached by a spice merchant. Don't get too excited now. It was not the famed Emirvar Emrys, but it was Druhar. This guy. Geralt is like, yes. But actually, it turns out that Druhar is looking for Master Dandelion, the famed poet. There is a wedding that is going to happen in Bremerwood. His son Gaspard is engaged to the ship captain's daughter Dalka. Druhard's wife sent him because she wants the event to have some sort of class, some sort of culture. Druhard lets it slip that there will be another bard present, and Dandelion gets very offended, saying that he will not be the second bard at a party. He is the main event event. Geralt is like, come on, Dandelion, just take this. We need the money. But Dandelion's like, Geralt, you have your Witcher Codex? Well, I have my Bard Codex, okay? And my Bard Codex says that I can't and I won't play second Bard to someone. But Geralt is like, Dandelion, please, we really need the money. I promise that I'll accept whatever the next contract that comes my way is. Just perform at this event. And so Dandelion agrees and asks Druhard who is the second Bard, or first Bard. He says that it is essi daven. And so we skip forward to the evening, and the wedding is in this old warehouse that is now very nicely decorated with flowers and ribbons to hide the smell of fish. As they enter, a beautiful voice floats over to them. Dandelion recognizes it as Essi's, but moreover, he realizes that she is singing his own ballad. She's known as Oczko. This is translated to Little Eye in English, but I'll get to my rant about that in a sec. After she finishes the ballad, she receives a lot of applause, and that is when Druhard comes over and welcomes Geralt and Dandelion, calling Geralt Gerard. And as he comes over, this is when Geralt notices her defining feature, her large blue eyes, and more specifically the one large eye that is revealed wears her hair kind of in a way that covers one. So let's get into this. She's described as having large eyes. Why is her name Little Eye? Well, there's layers to this. First off, Oczko comes from the word oko, which means eye, and her defining feature is her eye. The second part to this is that it's a diminutive. It's not oko, it's Oczko. It doesn't mean little eye. It can, but it's not necessarily that. It is like cute eye. It's like when you have a child that sees a horse, and instead of calling it a horse, they say, oh look, it's a horsey. Don't say something stupid like little horse. The other layer to this is that in Polish we have this saying that something is your oczko w głowie, so something is very important to you. I guess the English equivalent is the apple of your eye. Again, it kind of emphasizes the point of endearment, but then there's another saying that someone puszcza oczko, which means someone is throwing their eye, and in Polish it can kind of mean that you're winking at someone or that you're initiating a flirtation with someone. That is also kind of foreshadowing to what is going to be happening. So I really don't understand why the translation little eye is used. It doesn't apply to any of them. She has large eyes. Little eye is not diminutive of eye, and it doesn't reference either of the two sayings. You have all those four layers absolutely lost, and so that's why I will be referring to her as Essi daven for the rest of the video. So remember, Essi is now talking to Dandelion. Essi mocks Dandelion's talent, while Dandelion mocks the fact that, you know, he is famed around all the courts, and where is she famed? But then Essi throws herself at Dandelion and kisses him on the cheek. Dandelion spins her around and calls her Pacynka, a nickname that perhaps your grandma would give to you. He sees her as a little sister, and to introduce her to his companion. She extends her hand to Geralt so that he kisses it, and that's when they notice that Prince Aglaval is attending. Dandelion makes a remark about Aglaval's stinginess, and then Essi turns the conversation to the rumor about Aglaval and Chinaz. Doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't believe that everyone's affairs should be aired out like the gossip on a market. Essi is offended. She asks him whether he was intending to offend her or to hurt her as well. She was just intending to start a polite conversation, but she tells him not to worry, that the markets will not be hearing her singing about this interaction. Druhard summons the two of them to Aglaval. Aglaval reluctantly reveals that he requires Geralt's help. He introduces Geralt to Celeste, who is a pearl diver. Recently, they haven't been able to catch any pearls, and so they have to venture further out all the way to a structure known as the Dragon Fangs. Celeste informs us that the boat that was sent out, it was found without any of the individuals that were supposed to be on it. In fact, it was just bathed in red blood. It has created terror in the ports, with even large ships fearing to go out to sea. And so Geralt is tasked with finding out what has happened. It also coincides with Essi finishing yet another song. She is handed chrysanthemums. This is an interesting detail that also foreshadows the ending of the story, because in Poland, chrysanthemums are a sign of mourning, the sort of flower that we put on our loved ones' graves. Dandelion starts singing his song. Geralt, he notices Essi slipping away to go to the terrace, and he follows her. When he meets her outside, he says that he apologizes that he doesn't want to disturb her, but she was only seeking fresh air, not solitude, and asks if he was also bothered by the stiffness inside. He was more so bothered by the idea that he had offended her earlier. Essi says that perhaps she overreacted and asks for a second chance. Geralt, as he's standing there, notices her scent, a scent of verbena, thinks that it's not exactly the scent of lilac and gooseberries. Essi looks out into the sea and asks Geralt what the sea reminds him of. He responds unease. Essi explains that the sea reminds her of something constantly moving, shifting, like a mystery, something that she could write 1,000 poems about and never quite capture. Geralt says that the way she describes it kind of suggests unease on her part, and she turns and looks into his eyes and reveals that she is neither calm or composed. And suddenly, they kiss. As they do so, they move together almost as if in a dance. Essi eventually frees herself, leaving Geralt feeling kind of foolish about the entire situation. She coldly asks why he did it. If he's looking for a woman for the night, then she's not it. And he remains silent. She touches his arm, saying that nothing happened, it's fine, and says that it's not his fault that she isn't looking for a man to simply spend the night with. She walks away, but right before she enters the warehouse, she turns back and says that the next song will be a song that she sings for him. We don't get to witness that song, however, because the next scene is one just between Geralt and Dandelion when they go to their hay for the night. Geralt is very irritated. Dandelion says that, well, after all, sleeping on a mattress without a woman is an incomplete happiness, kind of like an interrupted kiss. And Geralt gets annoyed, saying that all Dandelion knows to talk about is just women, bodies, and romance. That is clearly the dark side of his talent. That's what makes Dandelion realize that Geralt is affected by Essi Daven. Warns Geralt to not make any mistakes around Essi, that she's like a little sister to him. But Geralt quickly cuts off the conversation. They stay there in silence for a moment before Dandelion starts. Do you know what your problem is, Geralt? You think you're different. You flaunt your otherness, what you consider abnormal. You aggressively impose that abnormality on others, not understanding that for people who think clear-headedly, you're the most normal man under the sun. What of it that you have quicker reflexes than most and vertical pupils in sunlight, that you can see in the dark like a cat, that you know a few spells? Big deal. Once again, this emphasizes the fact that, Geralt is just a normal dude. He is the one that emphasizes his otherness so much, so perhaps there is kind of a bit of a bias when we read through Geralt's perspective. Dandelion then suggests that a certain Yennefer ruined Geralt's ability to be with normal women, and that perhaps Geralt would benefit from being with someone normal and sweet, like Essi. Dandelion makes some more offensive jokes about Yennefer. Geralt kind of defends her, but ultimately the conversation ends with them just being pissed at each other. Geralt calls Dandelion a cynic, a lecher, and a liar, and Dandelion responds with good night, ending the conversation and going to sleep. The next day, we meet Geralt and Essi on the pier. Essi says that she couldn't miss seeing a Witcher in action. Essi reveals that she knows about the boat incident, and Geralt takes her hand as they go on a walk, realizing that he likes spending time with her. And they strike up a conversation about monsters, sea monsters especially, why Witchers don't engage in that field. Geralt says that sea monsters are kind of beyond the Witcher's ability because they were made to fight on land. Sea monsters are usually just too big and too well armored for a Witcher to deal with. They discuss the case of the boat, and Essi proposes that perhaps the creature came on board because there doesn't seem to be any damage from below the boat, ruling out something like a kraken. That's when they see Aglaval approach them. He is blaming Geralt for everything. He says that he waited for Shinaz for like 3 hours on the rocks and she never appeared. He's also mad because he's heard rumors around the town that the mermaid was angry and that the incident with the boat is kind of like revenge. Geralt says that that's nonsense, but Aglaval demands proof that Shinaz isn't responsible. So he orders Geralt to bring the head of the creature that was responsible, or to leave. Geralt retorts that he would, but no one is willing to take him to sea. Essi takes Geralt back and says that she's known to write the chronicle of history and that Aglaval doesn't want to be remembered as a bad, heartless ruler. Aglaval walks away. After he does so, Essi comments that Geralt is very easily manipulated when women and children are mentioned, because that was something that Aglaval kind of was using as his argument for. But Geralt says that risking his life is just part of his everyday job and that his emotions weren't swayed by mentions of babies or anything. But Essi says that she knows that's not true because he didn't even mention a fee for which he would be doing this. Then she says that, well, if no one wants to take him out, she knows how to sail a boat and she can take him, but Geralt quickly turns her down and says absolutely not. She speculates, what if Aglaval was right? What if this is some sort of revenge? Geralt shuts her down. To this she responds, you're sensitive. Deep in your angst-filled soul, your stony face and cold voice don't deceive me. You are sensitive and your sensitivity makes you fear that whatever you're going to face with sword in hand may have its own arguments, may have the moral advantage over you. No, Essi, he said slowly, don't try to make me the subject of a moving ballad, a ballad about a witcher with inner conflicts. Perhaps I'd like it to be the case, but it isn't. I don't want you to pick up false notions about me. I'm not a knight errant. You aren't a cold and unthinking killer either. No, he agreed calmly. I'm not, although there are some who think differently. It's not that I am sensitive, but you. After all, your profession demands that, doesn't it? You balk at the idea that a witcher hired by the Duke will murder an exquisite mermaid just because she dared to yield emotion. But the witcher, Essi, is free of such dilemmas. Even if it turns out that it was the mermaid, the witcher won't kill the mermaid because the codex forbids him. The codex solves the dilemma. To which she says, all dilemmas, kind of hinting at Yennefer. After a moment of silence, she apologizes for asking such a naive question. And they notice that the rock where Shinaz usually meets Aglaval is no longer visible, so the tide is returning. And Essi displays her sailor knowledge by explaining that the tide is rising and will soon reach the shelf. Specifically, it will end off at the dragon fangs. And suddenly they hear a little splashing off to the side, see that it is Shinaz, asking where her loved one is. Geralt says that he waited for 3 hours before leaving, and Shinaz is outraged once again at his lack of dedication. Polish, she once again says the word poświęcenie, but poświęcenie is not strictly sacrifice. You can poświęcić czemuś uwagę, which means sacrificing a bit of your attention for someone. It's just like an everyday saying. She then asks Geralt if he is on a walk with his lover, referring to Essi, and Geralt says, she's not my lover, we barely know each other. Shinaz says that, well, they do look good together despite their aberrations, their legs. And Essi introduces herself to the mermaid, speaking in the mermaid tongue, which surprises both Geralt and Shinaz. Geralt asks if she knows who was responsible for the pearl divers, but Shinaz reacts very violently and says that they should not go close to the dragon fangs, that it's not for them. She disappears into the depths. Geralt turns to Essi and says that he didn't know that she knew Elder Speech so well. Essi says that, well, of course he doesn't know, after all. Don't they just barely know each other? The next scene is that of Geralt and Dandelion walking over to the dragon fangs. Dandelion is collecting a bunch of them, hoping that perhaps one of them is going to have a pearl. He wants to give something to Essi because her birthday is going to be soon. He's looking for something special, perhaps something like amber. This specific highlight to amber can be a reference to the legend of Queen Jurata, who was a queen that lived at the bottom of the Baltic Sea in a beautiful amber castle. One day, when she heard that a fisherman was killing too many fish, she swam out to meet him. Upon seeing each other, the two immediately fell in love. But when the god Perkun realized what relationship the two of them were having, out of jealousy, he decided to destroy Jurata's beautiful amber palace. According to this legend, the amber that is now found along the Polish and Baltic coastlines comes from this destroyed palace. And if we translate this to real Polish history, well then cities like Gdańsk were very important in the trade route that was known as the Amber Road. This transformed Gdańsk into the amber capital of the world. Anyways, when they reach the dragon fangs, a bit of the shelf reveals itself, and Dandelion is very excited because he thinks that he sees pearl oysters. Geralt says, well, he can go ahead. The monster goes after pearl divers, so Dandelion might as well act as bait. He notices a weird passageway, almost like stairs, and he recognizes this as the entryway into the submerged city of Ys. They hear muffled bell sounds from the depths. Dandelion thinks it is a warning from the city, but Geralt ignores him and focuses his Witcher senses, feeling something. And that is when they are attacked by fish-like looking creatures that wield scythe-like weapons. In Polish, they are referred to as rybioki. This roughly translates to the fish-eyed. Fight begins. It's very intense. They manage to run away a little bit, but there's just too many of them. He just tells Dandelion to run. He runs after him. There are many different elements to this fight, but Geralt does get overwhelmed eventually, and as he's being dragged down into the depths, he has a thought that if he ever manages to get out of this, he vows to go back to Vengerberg and to try to have a relationship once again with Yennefer. But that's when he hears a trumpet, and suddenly he is being dragged back up. Shinaz rescued him riding a dolphin, and the trumpet that he heard was her blowing through a seashell. She saved him, but she also tells him that the fish-eyed will return. The ocean is not a place for humans, and urges him not to return. Geralt is wounded but alive, and he is just grateful for his life. A little bit later, we see Essi bandaging up Geralt's wounds. Dandelion managed to get out of the situation alive, but he is kind of triggered that pretty much all the oysters that he picked up were actually snail oysters. Essi finds a bag that is still full of seaweed and then discovers a beautiful blue mussel shell. Basically, when Dandelion and Geralt were at the dragon fangs, Dandelion found a blue mussel shell and thought it was very beautiful and slipped it into Geralt's pocket. Geralt tells her that Dandelion meant for this shell to be present for Essi. Essi asks if Geralt remembered that it was her birthday as well. Geralt just apologizes for Dandelion's behavior earlier. She'll cut it open and give the contents to the cats. But as they do, something falls onto the floor. It is a beautiful baby blue to Pearl. Seemingly, after all, Essi did receive a beautiful present. But Essi hesitates, saying that it has a lot of value and if he doesn't regret giving it away since it's so expensive. Geralt says that he only regrets that he hadn't known Essi long enough to remember that it was her birthday. She suddenly embraces him and gives him a kiss, but he avoids. Essi says, well, of course, after all, we barely know each other. She confesses her love for him, but Geralt remains silent and then only after a while asks her to sit next to him. When I found out, she whispered, interrupting the long silence, when I heard that Dandelion had dragged you onto the beach bleeding, I ran out of the house like a mad thing. Do you know what I thought? That you had secretly treacherously bewitched me, spellbound me with your wolfish medallion. But I didn't stop, kept running because I understood that I desired to fall under your spell. If it had been magic, it would all be so simple and easy. I would have succumbed to your power and I'd be happy. Damn it, he thought. I want you to think of that passage. Does it perhaps ring some bells? Sleigh bells? If Yennefer feels like I do now when she's with me, I feel sorry for her and I shall never be astonished again. I will never hate her now. Never. Because perhaps Yennefer feels what I'm feeling now, feels a profound certainty that I ought to fulfill what is impossible to fulfill. Even more impossible to fulfill than the relationship between Aglaval and Shinaz. Certainty that a little sacrifice isn't enough here. You'd have to sacrifice everything, and there'd still be no way of knowing if that would be enough. No, I won't continue to hate Yennefer for not being able and not wanting to give me more than a little sacrifice. Now I know that a little sacrifice is a hell of a lot. This passage is very important because it is revealed that the dynamic between Geralt and Essi is pretty similar to the dynamic between Geralt and Yennefer, at least in Geralt's interpretation of that dynamic. I'm ashamed of what I'm feeling. Someone who is ill or who has drunk poison might feel like this because, like someone who has drunk poison, one is prepared to do anything in exchange for an antidote. Anything, even be humiliated. I've always been afraid of illness, of being weak, helpless, hopeless, and alone. I've always been afraid of sickness, always believing that it's the worst thing that could befall me. He was silent. I know I ought to be grateful to you for not taking advantage of the situation, but I'm not grateful to you. I'm ashamed of it, for I hate your silence, your terrified eyes, and I hate her, that sorceress of yours. I'd happily stab her for. I hate her. Damn it, he thought, hearing her voice dropping like rag balls rolling down the stairs. She'll burst into tears, he thought. I don't feel anything, he noticed with horror. Nothing, not the smallest emotion. That fact that I will embrace her is a deliberate, measured response. I'll hug her, for I feel as though I ought to, not because I want to. I feel nothing. When he embraced her, she stopped crying immediately, wiping away her tears, shaking her head forcefully and turning away so that he could not see her face. A little sacrifice, he thought, just a little sacrifice. She doesn't want anything more. And even if she did, what of it? It doesn't matter, because Essi smells of verbena, not lilac and gooseberries. Essi's hair is not a black tornado of gleaming curls. Essi's eyes are gorgeous, soft, warm, and cornflower blue. They don't blaze with a cold, hard, deep violet. Essi will fall asleep afterwards, turn her head away, open her mouth slightly. Essi will not smile in triumph, for Essi is not Yennefer. And that is why I cannot find that little sacrifice inside myself. And that is why people saying and insisting that Geralt would have been happier if he ended up with Essi are wrong. He asks Essi to stop crying and she promises that she won't anymore. She asks Geralt if perhaps they could be like that pearl. Not now, but sometime in the future. But Geralt just deflects this and says that he sees the pearl on a silver chain as the center of a silver flower around Essi's neck. That it would become her medallion just like he has his wolf medallion. A talisman that will protect her. So they sit together for a while longer with only the painful truth lingering between. Then later when Dandelion finally enters, he can feel what happened but he doesn't say anything. And Essi leaves. The next day or so, Geralt is once again talking with Aglaval about what happened at the Dragon Fangs. Aglaval dismisses the idea of an intelligent underwater race and just says that Geralt is trying to rip him off. Druhard and Celeste are there as well. Celeste insists that they have fought other non-human species, and Aglaval says that he is not wanting to start generations of war for pearls. He wants them now. He turns to Geralt and says he won't be paid because he isn't paying for good intentions, he's paying for results. So Geralt just says coldly that he will leave. But Aglaval says, no, you can stay here and act as like a protector for pearl divers. But Geralt, he says that it is an idiotism for bored princes, not for witchers. Aglaval mocks how he still refuses jobs despite being hungry and broke. Then Essi steps in and furiously defends Geralt, saying that the injuries that he sustained should be evidence enough. That Aglaval periodically dismisses the sacrifices that people make for him. That Geralt doesn't care because Geralt knows at the end of the day that despite being a witcher, he is a better person. And And something that is important to note is that as she's saying all of this, she is fidgeting with a little medallion that she has on a silver chain. At the center of it is a blue pearl set into a daisy-like structure made of silver. Aglaval kind of angrily and dejectedly says that he just doesn't understand why he doesn't have them all hanged and whipped. And Essi immediately responds that it's because he has some drop of goodness inside of him. He has a heart that was capable of loving a mermaid. This quiets Aglaval and he tells them all to leave. But Essi gives him a final warning. Other races that they were able to fight, like the elves and non-humans, they're fighting on mountains and in forests. In the ocean, the fish-eyed would have an advantage. But Aglaval disagrees. We shall learn whither lead those steps, if there is anything at all. And we shall draw from the ocean everything we can. And if not, then our grandsons will do it, or our grandsons' grandsons. It is just a matter of time. Yes, we shall do it, though the ocean will run red with blood. Life is a battle. These witchers, it was they who showed us the way, who paved the way. They strewed the path with the corpses of those who stood in the way of humans. We, Essi, are only continuing that battle. It is we, not your ballads, who create the chronicles of humanity. Essi pales and asks him if he's sure that nothing will stop him. And Aglaval repeats, nothing will stop us. But then suddenly a commotion arises, and the guards near the door starts clearing a path. And who do they see? It is the green-haired Shinaz, who has turned into a human. Overwhelmed, Aglaval falls to his feet and starts saying how much he loves her. Dandelion exclaims that it's just like the ballad, where the mermaid becomes human, gains legs, but loses her voice. And then Shinaz surprises everyone by saying that she hasn't lost anything. She greets Geralt and Essi, teasing them once again about their relationship, asking if they know each other better, or if still barely at all. Aglaval is at her feet, professing to her that he loves her. And Shinaz playfully offers him her hand, saying that she loves him too, declaring that true love is worth making sacrifices for. But something that I think is kind of misunderstood sometimes is that she walked in and she made this sacrifice not only because she loves Aglaval, but also because she loves her home. She loves the ocean. She enters and she makes the sacrifice not for Aglaval, at least not fully for Aglaval, but she makes the sacrifice to prevent the war that he would be waging on her home. It brings this idea that sometimes to make that sacrifice, sometimes the relationship isn't enough and it requires something more. In this case, it was the threat of war. After this, Geralt, Essi, and Dandelion leave the next day, and they travel together crossing the Adelante River. Essi takes advantage of Dandelion's short absence and says to Geralt that she just can't bear the situation between them anymore. She waited for his answer, for some words, for a little sacrifice. But the Witcher had nothing he could sacrifice, and he knew it. I have nothing in me to sacrifice for you. What did Yennefer say to Istrid? Then Dandelion returns and interrupts them for a while, saying that he is tired of watching this unresolved tension between them. He says, "What do you expect from him, Poppet? The impossible? And you, Geralt, what are you hoping for? That Ochko will read your thoughts like the other one? That will make her happy while you conveniently stay quiet, not having to explain, declare, or deny anything, and not have to reveal yourself? They are about to part ways, and when do they want to understand each other? Years from now, when they are but memories in each other's imaginations?" He storms off and gives them some time alone. Eventually, Geralt talks to Essi at length as her eyes fill with tears. But in the end, they end up sleeping together, and after they do, everything seems all right again. The next day, the three of them prepare a celebratory dinner before they part. This meal is special because in the morning they will part, each going in separate directions, searching for something that they haven't realized yet, but they have already found with each other. And now I want to read the ending of this story to you. Dandelion, staring into the dying embers, sat much longer, alone, quietly strumming his lute. It began with a few bars, from which an elegant, soothing melody emerged. The lyrics suited the melody and came into being simultaneously with it, the words blending into the music, becoming set in it like insects in translucent golden lumps of amber. The ballad told of a certain witcher and a certain poet, about how the witcher and the poet met on the seashore among the crying gulls and how they fell in love at first sight, about how beautiful and powerful was their love, about how nothing, not even death, was able to destroy that love and part them. Dandelion knew that few would believe the story told by the ballad, but he was not concerned. He knew ballads were not written to be believed, but to be moved by them. Several years later, Dandelion could have changed the contents of the ballad and written about what had really occurred. He did not, for the true story would not have moved anyone. Who would have wanted to hear that the Witcher and Little Eye parted and never saw each other again? Not once. About how 4 years later, Little Eye died of smallpox during an epidemic raging in Vizima. About how he, Dandelion, had carried her out in his arms between corpses burning on funeral pyres and buried her far from the city in the forest, lonely and peaceful, and with her, as she had asked, two things, her lute and her baby blue pearl, the pearl from which she was never parted. Dandelion stuck with his first version, and he never sang it, never, to no one. Something that really kills me every time I read this passage, because it always makes me cry, as evidenced here, is when it says, Wiedział, że ballad nie pisze się po to, by w nie wierzono, ale po to, by się nimi wzruszano. I love this line. Ballads were not written to be believed, but to be moved by. The way it echoes from like the start to the end of the story really kills me. David French also translates the word samotna, which is describing Essi, as alone, but no, Sapkowski is writing that she died lonely, which is more heartbreaking, I think. Just before dawn, an angry werewolf approaches them, but upon hearing Dandelion's song, he stops and listens for a while and then walks away. And so this is the end of the fourth short story in Sword of Destiny. It is a very beautiful one. It is a very melancholic one. Although it seems, I think, a bit disconnected at the start, it is very important when building out Geralt's character and Yennefer, even though she's not here. But also, if we think about the Aglaval and Sheena's story, I guess they're another parallel to Yen and Geralt, but in a different way, because in the end, the two of them end up together. But it's not because of their love, it's because something more was needed. And on that note, let's move on to the next story, the titular story of this collection. And so we have arrived to the magical forest of Brokilon. And what's more, we have arrived at the titular story of this book, The Sword of Destiny. This is one of my favorite short stories in this collection because it showcases such a different side to Geralt that we just haven't seen before. And I just think it's so magical, it's so evocative. But how does it all start? It is the year 1262 when Geralt decides to venture into the Brokilon forest. It is around noon as he walks in, and he's quickly stopped by finding the dead body of a 15-year-old boy. And, you know, normally dead bodies don't faze him, but when he looks at this dead boy, he notices the arrows sticking out of him. An arrow with colorful feathers and another arrow that is just nearby that looks exactly the same. The first arrow was probably a warning, and then stressed, the boy probably ran in the wrong direction, so he got shot again. When the arrow was supposed to say, "Begone, human, leave Brokilon at once. You have conquered the whole world, human. Everywhere is full of you. Everywhere you carry that which you call modernity, the era of changes, that which you call progress. But we want neither you nor your progress here. We do not desire the changes you bring. We do not desire anything that you bring. Get out of Brokilon." Geralt, in response to this, is thinking, no matter that you are 15 and struggling through the forest, insane with fear, unable to find your way home, no matter that you are 70 and here to gather brushwood because otherwise they will drive you from the cottage for being useless. They will stop giving you food. No matter that you were 6 and you were lured by a carpet of little blue flowers in a sunny clearing. Get out of Brokilon. But despite this early vestige of death, the forest is very vibrant, very alive. Geralt walks on and sees other signs of previous victims in the soil until he encounters someone who is not dead, and it's someone he recognizes. It's Freixenet. Freixenet is shocked. He thinks that when he's seeing Geralt, a figure from his past, he thinks he is hallucinating. Freixenet was also caught by the arrows of the dryads of Brokilon. One has pierced his lung and collapsed it. Geralt asks why they entered Brokilon, knowing that it is the dryad sanctuary. But the only thing through his pain that Freixenet can convey to Geralt is that he has to save her, the princess. Geralt tries to lift Freixenet, but Freixenet's too heavy, and so he starts searching around for materials in order to make a stretcher. But then he hears the whistle and a thud. An arrow has embedded itself into a tree trunk next to his head, but then he turns around and announces himself as Gwynblythe, the White Wolf. A dryad appears and he tries to speak, but soon 2 others appear and all of them are pointing their arrows at him. They question his identity, but he says that he has come to Brokilon in peace, that he is seeking Lady Aithne, and that he comes with a message. The dryads then confirm that he is a Vatgerd, a witcher, and he says yes. Before he goes on, he points out his friend Freixenet and says that he needs help. Despite initially refusing, the lead dryad seems to redirect one of the others to go check up on Freixenet, while telling Geralt that he has to go to Dwen Canel, and indicating that the honey-haired dryad will be the one that leads him there. She tries to move quickly through the forest, trying to exhaust him, but you know, he's a witcher, he can't be that quickly exhausted. She, on the other hand, Geralt starts noticing her breath is too shallow and she is getting exhausted. And from her smell as well, he deduces that this individual is not a full-blooded dryad, actually. He asks her name again, and she says that her name is Brian. Geralt asks her, okay, but what was your original name? Brian claims that she doesn't remember. He estimates that Brian looks to be around 16 years old, maybe, so she probably was brought to Brokilon 6 or 7 years ago. This is also where we get a little bit of exposition about dryads. Dryads are magical creatures of the forest, and when they reproduce, the daughters, because most of them are daughters, inherit only the mother's traits. Of course, there are some exceptions, but they are very, very, very rare. And so they journey through the treacherous swamps and forests of Brokilon, as Brian warns Geralt of any deadly traps or any secret signals that he would have to give to the dryads in order to be able to progress to the heart of the forest. And despite their fast pace, they do have to stop for the night. The next day, as they are journeying through the forest once again, it's all going fine until they hear a very loud scream. Brian immediately prepares her bow, but Geralt stops her from shooting. They see a tiny grey figure pressed up against the tree. And very soon after, they see a monster, a scolopendromorph, or the way Brian calls it, a Jägern. Geralt fights bravely, but at some point the monster is able to grab Geralt and immobilize him and pull him down, at which point Brian shoots an arrow at the creature, pinning it to the tree and forcing it to release Geralt, who can finish off the job. After this fight, they go over to see what happened with the little dryad, because they're assuming that it's a baby dryad, but instead they find just a normal human girl in the most not normal of spaces. The girl's hair is described as jasne myszo-popielate włosy, which translates to light, mousy, ashy hair. She also has striking green eyes, and she's no older than 10 years old. So Geralt asks who she is, why she's there. The girl refuses to answer, but Geralt has this weird nagging sensation as if he's seen her before somewhere. Foreshadowing. Brian, knowing the forest and the behavior of Jägerns, she says they should probably get away from the area as soon as they can. And so they get away, and as they do, Geralt asks the girl her name, and she finally discloses that her name is Ciri. A quick thing about pronunciations, because I had some comments requesting that I bring this to my English viewers' attentions. So in Polish, the C creates a sound of TS. So if you watch any Polish reviewers or, I don't know, the Polish version of The Witcher, it will be Ciri and Cintra. Geralt is worried that perhaps this girl escaped from Dwyncanel, but Brian says that she's never seen her before. Then Geralt looks at her clothes and realizes that they are well made, so she's probably not just some peasant girl, but rather a noble one. And she is described as wearing a kubraczek z czerwonym kapturkiem, and that translates to a jacket with a little red riding hood. This is when we get to what is this a retelling of, because as we know, Sapkowski loves his retellings. Well, this is a retelling, a very, very, very loose one of Little Red Riding Hood. Ciri being the titular character, and Geralt being the white wolf, the Gwynblade, that she meets in the forest. With all this information, Geralt has this aha moment and realizes that this is probably the princess that Frexnet was looking for. So Geralt asks Ciri where she's from. He also calls her a brat, which she does act very bratty in this short story, but like it's in a cute way, maybe. He tells her that she's being searched for and then informs her that he will be taking her home, which causes Ciri to bolt. So Brian shoots an arrow and the arrow trips her. Geralt gets very pissed at Brian because he's like, yo, you could have like shot her. And Brian's like, yeah, whatever, but she's a human. Then he catches up to Ciri and says this, stupid brat, he hissed furiously. This is Brokilon. Wasn't the scolopendromorph enough? By yourself, you wouldn't live to see the morning in this forest. Don't you get that yet? Don't touch me, she yelled. You peasant. Okay, in Polish, what she says is ty pachołku, which is like, I don't know, it's just so funny. It doesn't translate. I am a princess, so don't try me. You are a foolish imp. And once again, Geralt here uses not just foolish imp, but smarkula. There are descriptions of a little bit of fluid coming out of Ciri's nose, and so she's doing like a the entire time. When he says smarkula, that he's kind of describing her as a girl who has that, but it also means like brat, kind of. There's layers to this, okay? Why were you running away, your highness? And where to? What were you afraid of? She said nothing and sniffed. Very well, as you wish. He winked at the dryad. We're going. If you want to stay alone in the forest, that's your choice. But the next time a Jägern attacks you, don't yell. It doesn't befit a princess. A princess dies without even a squeal, having first wiped her snotty nose. Let's go, Brian. Farewell, your highness. Wait. I'm coming with you. Oh, we are greatly honored, aren't we, Brian? But you won't take me to Kistrin again, you promise? Oh, damn it. Kistrin. Prince Kistrin, the son of King Ervil of Verden. Now we're kind of getting the idea of what's going on, but we're also getting the sense of Geralt and Ciri's relationship. He's so frustrated, but as he starts caring for this little girl, we will as well. The plans have changed that he has to take her back to Kistrin and to King Ervil of Verdun. But Aithne can wait while he escorts the girl home. But then Brian reaches for her arrow and declares that neither he nor the girl are going anywhere, that the two of them are going to Dwyncanel. Not wanting to be taking back, Ciri runs over to Brian and says that she's gonna go with her. They prepare to leave for Dwyncanel. But then Ciri starts complaining about a pain in her leg, and so Geralt offers to carry her on his shoulders. He asks how she got to Brokilon in the first place. Ciri defiantly says that, well, she never got lost in Brokilon. It was the fault of the horse. She and Mark, the squire, and they got lost in the fog and ended up going to the woods, and then they got separated. Geralt realized that the boy, the 15-year-old boy that he saw upon entering the forest, was Mark, the squire. Geralt reflects that this poor squire probably heard stories about, the poor princess. Squire saw her and wanted to help her, just like the knights in all the heroic stories that he's probably grown up listening to do. Except this isn't a story, and in the real world, the squire dies. It's all quite tragic. Geralt explains to her that marriage, in the case of princesses, is not something they do out of love. It's just something that they have to do. Ciri accuses him of lying to her like everyone else does to her. But Geralt ignores this snide remark, and so Ciri threatens to bite his ear. So Geralt loses his patience, sets her down from his shoulders. He reminds her that he is not her loyal servant. They walk in silence until the night falls and prompts Ciri to call to Geralt, calling him noble sir, which amuses Geralt, but he asks her what's up and that he's not a noble sir, he's just Geralt. She's very hungry. Geralt has some apples and cheese. She thanks Geralt for giving her the food and saving her from the centipede. They keep walking and Geralt says, "Don't wriggle, princess, future Duchess of Verdun." "I'm not going to be a duchess," she retorted. Very well, you won't be a duchess. You'll become a hamster and live in a burrow." "No, I won't. You don't know anything." "I'm going to be." "Yes? What?" "It's a secret." "Oh yes, a secret. Splendid." This is just another funny little interaction between them. Something that I think is translated wrong is in Polish, there is the difference between Ciri describing herself as a księżniczka, and then Geralt is telling her that she will become a księżna. Księżniczka is princess, but księżna, I think a better translation would be duchess. Multiple times throughout the story she says, "No, I'm a princess." David French translates księżna and księżniczka as princess. As they lay down Brian, she declares that Ciri, since she entered Brokilon, she is now part of Brokilon and will have to remain there. Geralt responds sharply that it will be Lady Aithne that decides Ciri's fate, but he knows deep down that Brian is right. He asks Ciri where her parents live. Her parents are actually dead. They drowned at sea when she was very young. And so he tells her to sleep. "Sleep," he said. "Sleep, little orphan." Here he is using the word sierotko, the diminutive, so it's fond. He's showing fondness for her. "I'm a princess, not an orphan, and I have my grandmama, so you'd better be careful." "Geralt." "What, Ciri?" "Grandmama knows I have to go home. I can't be a princess or the wife of that stupid Kistrin." "Geralt, promise you won't tell anybody. It's a terrible secret. Swear." "I swear." "My mama was a witch, and my papa was enchanted too. I'm destined, you know." "To do what?" "I don't know," Ciri said intently, "but I'm destined. That's what my nanny said, and nanny said that nothing at all can help with the destiny." Geralt tells Ciri to go to sleep. Ciri says that she can't fall asleep without a bedtime story. Geralt refuses at first, but she asks him if he never got any bedtime stories. Geralt laughs, but Geralt relents and he starts telling Ciri a story. So cute to me. I think there's such a disconnect in how Geralt is portrayed or talked about versus how he is. Everyone's always like, "Oh yeah, Geralt, the macho monster hunter," and they're not wrong in some aspects, but what about the Geralt that tells a runaway princess a bedtime story? It's so cute to me. And he struggles a little bit to come up with the story at first, but ends up telling about the fox and the cat. There once was a cat who ventured into the forest. It met a fox. What's important is that the fox tells the cat that it knows 1,000 ways to run away from humans who may be hunting him for his fur. Brian also snuggles up to them. Brian is a very lonely figure, and she wants to bask in the warmth that she starts seeing emanate from the two here. Cat says that it only knows one trick, to run up the tree. Right as the cat and the fox finish talking, a bunch of hunters appear and they kill the fox while the cat runs up the tree and is able to go down safely after the hunters left. Ciri asks what is the moral of the story, because obviously stories have to have morals. And so Bran says that, well, clearly this is a story about survival. Don't overthink it, just act. And she tells Ciri that clearly she, instead of running to Brokilon, should have just climbed up a tree if she wanted to get away from Kistrin. But Ciri quickly catches on and asks if they are making fun of her, and Geralt says, uh-huh. And so Ciri grumbles that she doesn't like him, but what she says in Polish is nie cierpię cię, which is softer way of saying I hate you, but it's not really hate, because if you wanted to say I hate you, it would be nienawidzę cię. I don't know. I just find all of it cute. Like, in context, it's all cute, okay? And Geralt playfully plays along and pretends to be heartbroken, saying that she got him right in the heart. To which Ciri becomes very serious and says, I know. They're my everything. And so Geralt tells Ciri and Bran goodnight, and they fall asleep with the forest humming above them. The next day, the three of them arrive at this structure called the Trees, and it's these huge trees that stun Ciri to such an extent that she manages to not speak for a whole half an hour. Bran asks Geralt to close his eyes. She needs to blindfold him. They're approaching Dwyncanel, and she wants to lead him, but Ciri says no. She tells Geralt to take her hand, and that she will be the one that leads Geralt to Dwyncanel while he is blindfolded. I mean, how cute is that? And just like that, they have finally reached Dwyncanel. Dwyncanel is the heart of the forest. It is beautiful. Geralt notes that he's been there twice before, but every single time that he goes there just seems to be fewer and fewer dryads. Ciri is just amazed at the architecture, because the dryads are able to manipulate the tree growth in a way that the trees grow to suit their needs. Suddenly, they stop at one of the shelters, and Bran tells Geralt to wait there for Lady Aithne. Inside, Geralt sees Frexnet, and he is perfectly healed. When he sees Ciri, he scolds her, saying that she nearly got him killed. And he says that she should count herself lucky that he can't get up at the moment, because if he would hit her. To which Ciri says that he shouldn't be hitting girls. I love her. Now, Frexnet explains the entire situation. Ervil is panicking. There are rumors that her grandmama is going to attack Verdun. After all, with Ervil, there are rumors that he takes advantage of little girls, and that he did so to Ciri, and to make sure that not a peep came out about it, that he drowned her. But with the political tensions rising, with pressures also from Nilfgaard in the south, a treaty with Ciri's grandmother would be paramount, and all of that is about to fall through. Frexnet, he's fine. He was healed by the Dryads. He thanks Geralt for saving his life again, and thinks that it's fate that has reunited them. Remember, I said that we are not yet done with the Hans Christian Andersen tales, because the one that Frexnet is from is the Wild Swans. In the Andersen tale, there is this girl called Eliza, and her 11 brothers were transformed into swans. And so in order to save them, she has to create these jackets, sweaters made out of nettles. Of course, as it is with Sapkowski, he changes the story from being a fairy tale to being something a bit more dark. Frexnet was transformed back in the day into a cormoran, not a swan. And his sister Eliza had a misguided belief that if she created a shirt for him out of stinging nettles, then he would transform back into a human. But he says that that is obviously stupid. Geralt, though, says that, well, she tried her best. And then there are many other much more stupid ways of lifting curses that the people believe in. Geralt teases Frexnet and says that the story of his curse did spread, but that it was exaggerated. The version to which it was exaggerated is essentially the Hans Christian Andersen version of the tale. He asks if Frexnet has any lingering effects from the curse, and Frexnet says no, he just really, really loves fish now. Ciri then realizes the truth, that Geralt is able to lift curses. Frexnet says, well, yes, obviously. After all, Geralt is a witcher. That shakes Ciri to her core. In this moment, Bran enters their little burrow and instructs Ciri to follow her. But Ciri is very hesitant, wanting to stay with Geralt. With all this happening, Ciri realizes why she wasn't blindfolded. The Dryads don't intend her to leave, and so she panics. That is until a powerful voice is heard saying that no one can escape their destiny. Aithne, the ruler of Brokilon Forest. I love the description of Dryads. I think they're so interesting and so mystical. I really love the fan art of them. She signals for Bran to take Ciri away, but Ciri is stiff and pale and she resists, and Geralt notices that the poor girl is crying. Geralt is greeted then by Aithne, and Aithne says that he entered the forest without permission, which is very dangerous even for him. And Geralt says that he knows that, but he is here because of King Wenslav. King Wenslav, who wants to create a treaty with Lady Aithne. She asks if Frexnet is Geralt's friend, he has children, if he ever had children, and summa summarum, after the longer conversation, Frexnet is chosen to stay in Brokilon and have children with Dryads. Geralt then asks, well, what about the girl? girl. What about Ciri? She's a princess after all. And Aithne dismisses that and is uninterested in Ciri's noble status. When Geralt attempts to continue this conversation, Aithne just silences him. She agrees to listen to Geralt's message in the end, but only for his sake, so that he can report back to Wenslav and to collect his reward. But she tells Geralt to come to her tree in the evening because she is currently occupied. The next scene is later in the day. Geralt enters the tree where he finds Lady Aithne, asks Geralt when he is planning on leaving, and Geralt says that really he can leave whenever she wants him. Aithne acknowledges Geralt's past kindness towards Dryads, but says that she won't be making any exceptions, and so he has to leave the next morning. Geralt says that he and Ciri belong to another world, and Aithne says that no, when it comes to Ciri, she no longer belongs to that world. And she says that Geralt, of all people, should understand her decision why she wants to keep Ciri in Dwencana. She references how witchers take children from their parents via the law of surprise. And she argues that she's merely doing the same, that she's going to continue to keep taking one human girl for every dryad that is killed by the humans. But Geralt warns her that if she takes Ciri, then that will just provoke human retaliation. Aithne dismisses this, saying that human hatred is nothing new to her. However, Brokilon's magic protects its children. Geralt says that he's here to discuss Wenslav's diplomatic offer. King Wenslav isn't like the other kings. He wants to create an enclave for Brokilon in exchange for protection and also the ability to get some of Brokilon's resources, but Aithne flat out refuses. To give up Brokilon after they've been defending it and dying for it for 200 years? No. They will not give up Brokilon, any of it. She says that peace can be maintained if Wenslav stays away from Brokilon, but Geralt says that there have been multiple places outside of Brokilon that Dryads have killed, to which Aithne counters that, well, they're not really places of Brokilon now, but they were, before they were taken over by humans, and she will not recognize these new human boundaries. Ciri then suddenly exclaims that her grandmama says Dryads aren't evil, and her grandmama is never wrong. Aithne laughs, and this is the first time that we have Ciri referred to as a child of the Elder Blood. She tells Geralt that it is absurd to say that something is ending when nothing is ending, and Ciri is proof of that. Aithne asks Ciri to repeat what she said earlier, and Ciri says that she must leave and that she must go home. She must go home with Geralt, because Geralt is her destiny. Aithne asks Geralt what he thinks of this, but Geralt doesn't respond. To this, Aithne claps her hand and orders Bran to bring forth a silver goblet with the waters of Brokilon. In response to this goblet, Geralt's medallion starts violently vibrating. And so Aithne questions Ciri if she wants to reject her destiny of becoming a dryad, and Ciri, trembling, really in emotional distress, says that yes, she really wants to leave. And Geralt asks Aithne why she is questioning, why she's dragging this out. She's obviously doing this just to hurt Ciri, especially when she soon will be forced to drink the waters of Brokilon, and then she will have no choice, she will have no memory. Aithne says that she is just demonstrating destiny. But Geralt refuses to witness it. He criticizes Aithne for saying that she has no hatred in her, but she truly is just demonstrating hatred, but in another form. He says that he will deliver this message to King Wenslav of Brugge, but he refuses to watch what happens next. So he kneels down next to Ciri and he tells her that everything is going to be okay, that nothing bad will happen to her. He says farewell to Bran, telling her that it's easy to remove yourself from the murder when it is the arrow doing the killing, but that the arrow doesn't have nightmares then of the little boys that she kills at night. And to this, Bran responds that she remembers her name, that her name was Mona. Ciri pleads Geralt once again to please not leave her alone. And Aithne asks Geralt if he's going to wait for Ciri to beg for him to not leave, but Geralt relents and stays. Aithne asks Geralt to read the inscription of the goblet, and the goblet says, "The sword of destiny has two blades. You are one of them." Then she hands the goblet to Ciri and orders Ciri to take a drink, and Ciri does, and nothing happens. Geralt watches in confusion, remembering the traumatic experiences and convulsions that other people had to drink the waters go through, but nothing happens to Ciri, and Bran, as she's watching this, has a single tear fall down her cheek. Then Aithne asks Ciri, does she want to stay or leave? And Ciri responds that she wants to leave. Aithne dismisses them all, but as they prepare to leave, Geralt goes to Aithne and says that she faked it, that the waters of Brokilon were clearly not waters, that it was all just a performance. And Aithne is very offended by this and says that if you really think so, then maybe he should be the one that takes the waters. And so he does. And so Geralt takes a sip, and things don't go too well. He starts having visions. He quickly collapses as Bran and Ciri run over, and he hears words telling him to look at his destiny, look his destiny in the eye and remember. He sees visions of a woman with a silver circlet and a blue dress, conducting magic on her birthday. Then he sees another green-eyed woman as he hands her a rose, and she tells him that should he ever come back, his destiny will be waiting for him. And then he's taken to Beltane, where a familiar voice says to him, "Too little, something more is needed," as a tear escapes her eye and goes down her cheek like a piece of wax going down the candle. And then he sees Queen Calanthe appear in bloody armor, saying, "The nothingness and void in you, conqueror of the world, who is unable even to win the woman he loves, who walks away and flees when his destiny is within reach. The sword of destiny has two blades. You are one of them, but what is the other, White Wolf?" "There is no destiny," his own voice. "There is none. None. It does not exist. The only thing that everyone is destined for is death." "That's true," says the woman with the mousy hair and mysterious smile. "That's true, Geralt. You sneer at destiny. The sword of destiny has two blades. You are one of them. The second is death? But it is we who die because of you. Death cannot catch up with you, so it must settle for us. Death dogs your footsteps, White Wolf, but others die because of you. Do you remember me?" Through all this, Geralt hears Aithne's voice telling Ciri that only she can save him before he vanishes into nothingness. Let it be so. Sometime later, Geralt awakes, and he is there with Ciri. He is outside of Brokilon, and he doesn't know how he got there, but it must have been something to do with the waters. And that's when he realizes Ciri is the daughter of Princess Pavetta. Grandmama is in fact Queen Calanthe of Cintra. Ciri recalls what her nanny told her, that she is a child of surprise, that she is destined for a white-haired witcher. She asks Geralt for confirmation if she is his child of surprise, and Geralt says that she is indeed the largest surprise that he could have ever asked for. She asks Geralt where he will take her, and Geralt says back home to Cintra. And Ciri is slightly disappointed. She expected something grander. And so Geralt says they have to leave Brokilon, and Ciri says that, well, she's not scared of anything, and Geralt says that, well, he is, and he tests if she's using some magic by having her touch his medallion, and it vibrates a little bit as she says, "What a scary wolf, what big teeth it has," once again referencing the Little Red Riding Hood. And so Geralt follows Ciri until they reach a fork in the road where there are different paths, and Geralt insists on one, overriding Ciri's ideal path. That is until they are suddenly surrounded by men. They're wearing Verdun colors, and their leader, Junghans, starts to question Geralt about who he is, where he's coming from, and where he's going to. Geralt says that they are from the burnt stump and they are just returning home. And that's when Junghans tells them to go forward. And after they step over a fallen stump, they see the scene of a massacre. They are told that the Dryads have caused this massacre, which included a toppled wagon, dead horses, and dead merchants. And so the men are claiming that they are now going into the forest to hunt Dryads in revenge for what they did to these poor people, especially wanting to avenge their former baron who had fell in battle, Frexnet. And after Geralt asks for a bit more details, Junghans tells him that, there was a freshly cut tree that stopped the merchants' ability to walk, and so that's how the Dryads forced them into the battle. Levesque, who is like a killer-looking type, explains to Geralt that they are there on a punitive mission sent by King Ervil. And then Ciri notices something, that the Dryads wouldn't have toppled the tree. Dryads don't hurt trees, so they must be lying. It is this group that caused the massacre. And Levesque says that she's a smart girl, too smart. A fight breaks out, but it is just one person against an entire party, and he would have lost the battle if not for a couple of Dryads, including a honey-haired one, starting to shoot arrows from behind the forest. The forest seems to almost grow around them, and as the last person falls, the illusory wall that seemed to block off the passage with trees suddenly disappears, and from behind it we see Malsak, the druid that we met all the way back in A Question of Price. As Malsak approaches, Geralt says farewell to the Dryads, especially to the honey-haired one, calling her Mona, but the Dryad says that she doesn't know who Mona is, that her name is Bren of Brokilon. Malsak acknowledges Geralt and asks where Ciri is, because Ciri got lost amidst the commotion until they hear a voice coming from up in a tree. When Geralt tells her she can come down, Ciri hesitates and says that, well, she doesn't know how. Geralt scolds her, questioning why she would climb up a tree, and then Ciri reveals that she climbed up a tree because that is what the cat did in the story that Geralt told her. That was the moral of the story, wasn't it? She just can't seem to do anything right, jeez. She runs joyfully to Malsak, who she calls Uncle Malsak, and Malsak says that Calanthe is gonna have questions for her, but that the plans have changed and she no longer has to marry Kistrin. Malsak also encourages Geralt to come with them, saying that, the paths of Ciri and his have crossed multiple multiple times and that it's a sign of destiny. But Geralt says sarcastically, well, what should he do? Should he turn Ciri into a witcher? That's ludicrous. And the druid, he warns Geralt that if he keeps rejecting her, then it can lead to a destructive outcome, but Geralt is dismissive of this. He says that he has the right to walk away, to which the druid says that, well, the sword of destiny has two edges, and that if Geralt will decide that he has to take away the girl now, then Mousak won't stop him. But Geralt says, what makes Mousak so sure that Ciri would even want to go with Geralt and not return back to her grandmama? And Mousak says that it's because Ciri, who is now asleep in the cart, was only able to do so after Geralt held her and hugged her, and that through her sleep, she is muttering his name. And what's more, she seeks his hand with her little one. But Geralt just says that's enough and tells Mousak to give his regards over to Queen Calanthe. As Geralt rides away, Mousak says that he won't be able to escape. And Geralt says, what, my destiny? And Mousak responds, no. Her. Geralt doesn't get too far before he hears a shrieking voice saying, get out! Ciri was standing on the brow of the hill, a tiny grey figure with windblown ashen hair. Don't go! He waved his hand. Don't go! She yelled shrilly. I have to, he thought. I have to, Ciri, because I always do. You won't get away, she cried. Don't go thinking that. You can't run away. I'm your destiny, you hear? There is no destiny, he thought. It does not exist. The only thing that everyone is destined for is death. Death is the other blade of the two-edged sword. I am the first blade, the second is death, which dogs my footsteps. I will not expose you to that, Ciri. And then he disappears into the dark forest, leaving poor Ciri behind. And so we have reached the end of the titular story, in which we have met a very, very important character, one who was only hinted at in the previous book, and that's Ciri. I want to take a moment to focus on the structure of this book so far. Up until this point, I'd say that Geralt and Yennefer were the main through line connecting all the stories. Through these first 4 stories, we get more and more invested in this tension between Yennefer and Geralt. We question, well, how could this tension be resolved? And that is when we get to this short story, where we now know Geralt pretty well. Yennefer always remains an enigma, and I think that's such a huge part of why we find her so enthralling. And so knowing the conflict between Geralt and Yen, we're able to be introduced and start caring about Ciri. We come to care about Ciri because we care about Geralt. We find our Geralt, the Witcher, telling this little bratty princess a bedtime story. So weirdly endearing. And then when she uses that bedtime story to run up the tree to hide from a massacre, just like Geralt told her to. I mean, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's so heartwarming. And that's why it breaks our hearts when Geralt says that I have to leave Ciri. I have to go because I always do. And that's awful, emotionally awful. But it's also perfect because it's so reflective of the Geralt that we have come to know. A Geralt who leaves because he always does. He leaves Yennefer in Vengerberg. He always talks down to himself. He thinks he is not worthy. That death dogs his footsteps. Why would he want to put someone in his place? He thinks himself worthless. And that is stopping him from getting to that something more. And speaking of something more, here's the next short story. All right, I know that it's been hours at this point, but there's one short story left, and it is one that is very interesting structurally. This is almost like its own thing, and it has the structure of the framed narrative and the embedded narratives, just like The Last Wish. In order to convey that, I'll be adding in the relevant photos as we keep going. It is now the year 1264, 2 years since Geralt left Ciri that fateful day at the edge of the Brokilon forest. The precise location I'm not 100% sure of, but from what I can elicit, it is around the Mealybug Moors. And we actually start off with the perspective of Jurga. Jurga is a merchant, and he decided to cross this very shady bridge in this area where there's been a lot of fighting because Nilfgaard has attacked. He is currently hiding under his cart because he hears the sound of a horse approaching. The writer tells Jurga to come out, and although Jurga initially is terrified and refuses, he does later. It's almost nighttime, and at nighttime evil things come out. What is under the bridge on which they are on is described as like a cemetery, and well, multiple creatures feed on the fruits of war. But Jurga refuses to abandon his cart, saying that all his work from the previous year is found on it and he just can't lose it. Jurga still asks for his help, saying that he'll give the writer anything he wants. Well, the writer confirms when he says everything. Does you really mean everything? And Jurga says, well, yes. So the writer tells Jurga that he must give him whatever he finds at home after his return that he does not expect. Hearing some different sounds, the writer, revealing himself to be a witcher, tells Jurga to hide under the cart. And so hiding behind his his cart again, suddenly a lot of small creatures called neckers appear, and the Witcher fights them. It is a very difficult fight. He is barely able to escape with alive. In fact, the neckers all pile onto Geralt and seem to throw him off the bridge. And then silence. Jurga thinks that it's over, that the Witcher is dead, until he hears a voice behind him, sees the Witcher standing lopsided, still holding his sword. The Witcher steps forward and falls onto the cart. Jurga realizes the Witcher is hurt, but doesn't really know how to react, and so he just looks into the Witcher's eyes as he slowly slides off the cart onto the floor. Next, we are back in the Witcher's perspective. Of course, it is Geralt, the White Wolf, and he is kind of falling in and out of consciousness, and all that we know is that he is slowly being hoisted up onto Jurga's cart. The people helping Jurga with Geralt realize that Geralt is muttering a name. The name is Yennefer. A while later, Geralt regains his consciousness and asks where he is. Jurga reminds him that he saved him on the bridge, that now they are traveling in search of someone who is able to heal Geralt's wounds. Geralt tells Jurga that there is a green vial in his satchel, and Jurga gives it to him. Geralt drinks the potion and looks up at the night sky. And as he looks into the night sky, we are transported into our first embedded narrative. We find ourselves at Beltane, also known as Noc Majowa, May Night. The scene is beautiful. There are bonfires everywhere. It's a festival. Of course it is. Nearby, the drunken May King is kissing the May Queen in celebration of April coming to the end. The crowd sings and dances and shakes decorated poles that are covered in greenery and flowers, and a girl excitedly grabs Geralt and throws him into the tumult. So in Poland, Noc Majowa is this celebration that is deeply rooted in Slavic and pagan traditions, but then it's also been influenced by Christianity later on. It was believed to be this mystical night full of love and where the supernatural mixes with the natural. And just like we see in the scene, the celebrations included bonfires, dancing around the maypole, etc., etc. The May King and May Queen were voted usually from town to town, the most popular and girl and the strongest boy. And it is quite similar to the Celtic tradition of Beltane, and so Sapkowski kind of melts the two of them into one. Anyway, like I said, Geralt is in the tumult. He's dancing around. There's a girl that he's with. She's not exactly his type, but so what? It's Beltane. They can do whatever, right? That is until she looks into his eyes and sees their unnatural color and runs away. Geralt wonders why he's here until his medallion vibrates and he looks to the side and he sees a woman with dark hair off to the side going off with some random boy into the bushes. He sees her obsidian star on her choker and knows her. It's Yennefer. Almost sensing him, she turns around and sees him and flashes her blazing violet eyes at him and immediately lets the young boy go. And remember also that Beltane is Yennefer's birthday, and she says that he caught her red-handed, to which Geralt apologizes for interrupting. Yen laughs it off, saying that she'll live. She also says that, well, after all, the night is still young. Geralt starts saying her name, but he is lost for words. And so they just stare at each other in silence until Yen turns away and says no, that they shouldn't start again. But Geralt reminds her that Yen, it's Beltane. And so they move closer and they hug and he strokes her hair. And she looks up at him and she said that she wouldn't have a problem to restart, but what's the point? They would just end up in the same painful cycle that they've been in so many times. What would be the purpose? But Geralt questions, does everything have to have a purpose? And she responds, something drew us to these bonfires, to these people enjoying themselves. We meant to dance, abandon ourselves, get a little intoxicated, and take advantage of the annual loosening of moral, which is inextricably linked to the celebration of the endless cycle of nature. And look, we run into each other after how long has passed? Since a year, 1 year, 2 months, and 18 days. You move me. And oh my god, when she says you move me, she says wzruszasz mnie, which is the same word that a dandelion says that ballads are not supposed to be believed, but they're supposed to wzruszać people, so to move people. So she's saying the same thing. It just, oh my god, okay. You move me. Is that on purpose? On purpose, Yen. Geralt, she interrupted, suddenly moving away and tossing her head. Let me make things perfectly clear. I don't want to. He nodded to indicate that was sufficiently clear. And the thought of doing with you what I meant to do with that young blonde boy, according to the same rules, the thought, Geralt, seems to me somewhat improper. An affront to both of us. Do you understand? He nodded once more. She looked at him from beneath lowered lashes. Will you go? No. She was silent for a moment, fidgeting nervously. Are you angry? No. Right. Come on, let's sit down somewhere. I'm glad we've met. Truly. Let's sit together for a while. All right, Yen. Hey, I love them. Okay. And so they leave the festival behind and they go off into the moors under a tree. And this is the image that I have chosen to symbolize this embedded narrative. Geralt, sitting down, thinks that he wants to embrace her, but because, you know, he wants to keep his contrariness, he doesn't. But Yennefer looks at him and sighs, and she's the one who hugs him. And she doesn't do this because she read his mind, though she could. She does it because she knows him so well. And so they sit in silence until Yennefer does some magic up and starts fireworks, which are then echoed by different magicians all around. Yen, detached, watches it all and quite bitterly says that she hopes that these people enjoy this while they can. Geralt just strokes her hair, relishing the scent of lilac and gooseberries and just being with her again. But he knows that if he makes his desire for her too obvious, she will just push him away as always. So he prepares to ask her how she's been, and she, without him even saying anything, says that there's nothing worth telling him about. Something that's important to say is that the word she says is opowiadać, so it's kind of like telling a story. Geralt tells her not to read his mind because it unnerves him, and she apologizes, saying that it's a habit. And so she asks the same of him, and he responds the same, that there's nothing to opowiadać, nothing. And so they fall silent. That is, until Yennefer, just looking at this display of the bonfires, the fireworks, and the people celebrating, gets quite frustrated with the symbolism of this festival. They're enjoying themselves. They're celebrating the eternal cycle of nature regenerating itself. And us? What are we doing here? We relicts doomed to obliteration, to extinction and oblivion? Nature is born again. The cycle repeats itself. But not for us, Geralt. We cannot repeat ourselves. We were deprived of that. We were given the ability to do extraordinary things with nature. Occasionally, things antonymous to her. And at the same time, what is most natural and simple in nature was taken from us. So what if we live longer than them? After our winter, no spring will come, and we shall not be reborn. That which finishes will finish along with us. Geralt remains silent, not really sure how to respond, but he hates when she gets like this, and so he just rocks her like he would a baby, and she doesn't get angry. He knows she wouldn't. He knows that she needs this. She says that she missed his quiet, this quiet, the most. And so he leans down and touches her ear and thinks, I desire you, Yen. I desire you, but you know that. Yes, I do, she whispered. Yen. Just today, she said, looking at him with eyes wide open. Just this night, which will soon slip away. Let it be our Beltane. We shall part in the morning. Don't expect any more. Forgive me. If I have hurt you, kiss me and go away. If I kiss you, I won't go away. I was counting on that. As they become intimate, the distant fires and celebrations fade into their passion. And then afterwards, Yen, you're crying? No, Yen, I promised myself. I promised. Don't say anything. There's no need. You're not cold? Cold. And now, warmer. It had grown cooler. He hugged her more tightly and covered her with his cloak. Geralt? It'll soon be dawn. I know. Have I hurt you? A little. Will it begin again? It never ended. Geralt, do you remember when we met in the Kestrel Mountains? And that golden dragon? We're made for each other. Perhaps we're destined for each other, but nothing will come of it. It's a pity, but when dawn breaks, we shall part. It cannot be any other way. We have to part so as not to hurt one another. The one or ones who created us for each other ought to have taken care of something more. Destiny alone proves to not be enough. It's too little. Something more is needed. I knew it didn't make sense for us to make love. You're wrong. It does, in spite of everything. And here, you have to remember when I told you, like all this time ago, at the start of this video, and I think the Bounds of Reason, when they say, in spite of everything, and then she responds, in spite of everything, and now in spite of everything is coming back, and I need to calm down. Yen tells Geralt to write to Sintra, warning of the dark times ahead. She asks him not to do what he did when he was there last time. He has to go there as fast as he can. But she does tell him that he doesn't have to go yet, that they could perhaps sit together just until the sunrise. And so they do. And that's beautiful. Something that you may have noticed is that during those visions in the Sword of Destiny, Geralt witnesses in his visions this thing that happened to him. It happens before the Sword of Destiny, but it is only now that we see the scene in full. Now we are back in the frame narrative. Durga is telling Geralt that his wound is getting worse. He also informs Geralt that they have crossed into Sodden via the Trava River, and that now they are in the ground cherry forest. Durga tells Geralt that the border patrol recognized him as Geralt of Rivia, and what's more, that one of the guards promised to send a medic. Geralt just asks Durga for a potion with a green lid, and Durga complies. We find ourselves in the courtyard in Sintra, to the sounds of children playing around in the moat. Geralt is there 6 years after the events of A Question of Price, and he's asking after his child of surprise. He's asking where the boy is. But Mousak tells Geralt that retrieving the boy might not be as easy as he intended. When speaking to Calanthe, he should probably be careful. Geralt then asks what happened to Pavetta and Duny. Mousak responds, they were sailing from Skellige to Sintra. They were surprised by a storm. Not a single splinter was found of the ship. Geralt, that the child was not with them is an incredibly queer matter. Inexplicable. They were meant to take it with them, but at the last moment did not. No one knows why. The children play around and run around, and then Geralt realizes that amongst the boys there's a girl with a light braid waving out from behind her. As one of the boys falls and trips, he watches the girl run up to him, and when she looks up, he notices that she has green eyes. But Mousak takes Geralt along to his meeting with Calanthe. She remarks how punctual Geralt is. She admits that she was hoping that he would have forgotten or something would have kept him away, but as they all know, death dogs his footsteps and he never looks back. She mentions the power of destiny, seemingly binding Pavetta and Duny together all the way till their end. And so she asks how it's possible when looking at this couple to not believe in destiny. I think that is something very interesting. A lot of people say that, oh, these books are all about destiny. No, if you know everything that there is to know about these people, you know that this passage kind of maybe is oxymoronic even. Calanthe using this couple as proof of destiny fundamentally undermines the concept, but some people don't get it. But then Calanthe goes on to talking about this meeting that she's having with Geralt. She dramatizes it quite a lot. She says, the queen will tell the Witcher to choose out of the 10 frolicking children. The Witcher is able to choose the correct one. The Witcher will be able to have it. She looked into the trial of the grasses, and she discovered that 3 boys survive at most, and rarely 4. And that's just talking about the trial. And then come the changes. And how many boys will actually make it through to getting their medallion at the end? 1 in 10? 1 in 20? 30? Geralt is silent. What difference does it make in the end, Geralt? Which child dies or goes insane stuffed full of narcotics? What difference does it make whose brain bursts from hallucinations, whose eyes rupture and gush forth instead of becoming cat's eyes? What difference does it make whether the child destiny chose or an utterly chance one dies in its own blood and puke? If she decided to not give Geralt a child at all, that he would respect her wishes and just leave. He simply came here to have the chance to look his destiny in the eyes. She orders him to choose a child. She can't force him to make a choice that he doesn't want to. There's no point in a choice because no child that she has brought before him is suitable to become a Witcher. And what's more, none of them are Pavetta's son. She asks how Geralt knew that. Geralt says that, truly, it was just a guess. She challenges the legitimacy of the law of surprise, calling it a dangerous game. Why do the Witchers take children when there are so many orphans on the roads? Why would he claim a child and then come to reject it? She concludes that Geralt fears if destiny is real, and that when Geralt is afraid of something, he decides to leave. She says that fear drives him, and she asks him to contradict her, but he doesn't. He can't, because what she says is true. And so he asks how she figured it out. Well, no, it's her time to say that she didn't. It was just a lucky guess, and they laugh about it. And so Calanthe asks, do you believe a child of destiny would pass through the trials without danger? We believe such a child would not require the trials. So why is Ciri a Witcher in The Witcher 4? I want a good explanation, but this video is not about that. She asks Geralt, well, why doesn't he just father a child after all? Wouldn't his child have similar predispositions to be able to survive? But Geralt says that during the trials and the changes, that ability was taken from him. And well, Geralt wouldn't want to put a burden on his child like that. He remembers his mom. He reflects on her choice to abandon him, and he acknowledges it, though he does have some remaining bitterness about it. And that's how Calanthe deduces that Geralt's mom must have been a sorceress. She is surprised because aren't sorceresses not supposed to have children? And Geralt says, well, clearly his mom was surprised as well. But then they return to the topic of the situation where Calanthe wonders if destiny will not retaliate. And Geralt insists that destiny alone is not enough to bind people together. He will not take the child, and he will not change his mind. And so Calanthe asks Geralt, does he still want to look into the eyes of his destiny? And Geralt says no, that he changed his mind because he does not believe in destiny. And so Geralt picks a rose off the nearby bush and gives it to Calanthe as a farewell. This is the scene that we saw in another one of Geralt's visions in the Sword of Destiny short story, with Calanthe saying that you'll be waiting in Sintra with his destiny should he change his mind, but that for some reason she has an odd premonition that this is the last time that she and the Witcher will meet. She was correct. Back in the frame narrative, Geralt wakes up and realizes that his pain is gone and that the swelling in his leg has subsided. A woman is speaking to him softly, a voice that he perhaps recognizes. As he's waking up and seeing a bit more, he recognizes her flaming red hair and has a very emotional reaction. She reinterprets this reaction as pain and reassures him while prepping him to turn over. And now that he is faced away from her, Geralt tries to suppress his trembling. He tries to initiate some sort of casual conversation, asking if his wounds were difficult to heal. She says it was his abnormally slow heart rate that prevented him from dying. He is safe, he will have a scar, but other than that, he's fine. He thanks her and asks her name. She introduces herself as Visenna, but he already knew that. He expresses happiness that their paths crossed, and she says that she was called by the border control. She refuses any sort of payment from him, citing sympathy and solidarity for the Witchers, but advises him to stop taking hallucinogens because they don't have any healing properties. He thanks her again, and when he touches her, he feels a very youthful skin, which really disgusts him. He attempts to turn towards her, wanting to look her in the face. She initially resists, but ultimately remains by his side as he moves, and as he turns over, he sees her trembling lip. He studies her features, but finds no resemblance. Their gazes meet, and he says, "How do you like my enhanced eyes? Unusual, aren't they? Do you know, Visenna, what is done to Witcher's eyes to improve them? Do you know it doesn't always work?" "Stop it," she said softly. "Stop it, Geralt. Vesemir gave me that name. Geralt of Rivia. I even learned to imitate a Rivian accent, probably from an inner need to connect and have a family, a path. Even if it was an invented one, Vesemir gave me my name. Vesemir also revealed yours. I have pondered over what I would say to you when we finally met. I thought about the question I would ask you. Destiny? Oh yes. Yen was right. It's not sufficient to be destined for each other. Something more is needed. But tomorrow I'll look into your eyes in the light of the sun." "No," she said gently, in a voice which gnawed at, racked the layers of memory. Memory which no longer existed, which should never have existed. "You will fall asleep, and when you awake, you'll stop wanting. Why should we look at each other in the sunlight? What will it change? What will mutual hurt give us? Go to sleep, Geralt. And just between us, Vesemir did not give you that name. Although it doesn't change or reverse anything either, I'd like you to know that. Farewell, and look after yourself, and don't try to look for me. Visenna." "No, Geralt. Now you'll fall asleep, and I was a dream. Farewell." He calls out to her, but she uses magic on him to force him to succumb to sleep, and he does so. You see, the resemblance that Geralt was looking for in Visenna's face was his own, because Visenna is Geralt's mom, and this is the one and only interaction that they have, and it's heartbreaking, I think. But it underlines the point that destiny is not enough. The next day, Geralt and Yurga discuss their location. They are approaching the river Yaruga. Yurga notes all the ruins left by the Nilfgaardians in their invasion, but how ultimately there has not really been a change in the population because everyone who died was replaced by newcomers. Geralt asks if the people fear that Nilfgaard will return, and Yurga says maybe they fear, but life has to go on. Yurga expresses his faith in destiny, believing that it's destiny that joined him and Geralt on that bridge. Geralt dismisses that, saying that he only did it for money. But Yurga defends Geralt and likens Visenna the healer to him, saying that Visenna wouldn't even take any money and left a lot of different ointments for them. Yurga suggests that in some ways she cared for him like a mother would, and that it proves that not all magic users are to be feared. And to emphasize his point, he brings up the Battle of nearby Sodden, describing the second battle, the devastating one, where 22 mages fought to protect the land and 14 were killed atop the hill. He says that the mages could have lived long lives, but instead decided to die so that others may live. Geralt listens in silence as Yurga starts listing all the different people. He sees Geralt go incredibly pale, and thus we see a scene where Geralt climbs atop the hill where there is a large obelisk that has all the different names of the mages that fought and died. Geralt starts looking at the names that are scripted there. He notices the multiple different flowers that have been left around the obelisk. He begins reading the names. The first one is Triss Merigold, who was a chestnut-haired, youthful and cheerful girl who was very fond of him, and well, he was fond of her too. He says that she looks like a podlotek, which is a baby bird that's just about to fly, and I think CD Projekt did a great job with that description. Another name that he recognizes is Litanade, Coral, who was named after her coral lipstick. But as he reaches the last three names on the list, he hears a faint rustling behind him, and he turns around. He sees a woman who is barefoot. She's blonde. She has in her hair daisies in a vianek. Remember, like the one that I wore in the last episode? Geralt greets her, but she doesn't respond. She only looks at him with her cold blue eyes. She passes him and kneels at the floor of the menhir. She says that she doesn't bring flowers. Flowers that are here are brought for her. The way she kneels, she obscures the last name on the list. She appears to be almost unnaturally bright against the dark stone. Geralt asks who she is, and she responds, well, don't you already know? And he realizes that, well, he does. The air grows cold. And says that, well, he always was curious what she looked like. And she tells him that he not need be so formal. After all, they've known each other for years. He acknowledges, noting that people say that she follows him step by step. She confirms this, but she also points out that never before today did Geralt actually look behind him to check. He is exhausted, and so he asks her how it will happen. He asks what is beyond the fog. And she smiles and says nothing. He accuses her of following him and taking others from him, leaving him alone in fear. He admits that he had always feared her, but not anymore, because he has no one left to lose. She took everyone from him. So she challenges and says, well, if that's true, then why are your hands trembling? Why his eyes are filled with dread. She asks if he is scared of what the 14th name is. She asks if he should tell him, but he says, you don't have to. I know what it is. The circle is closing. The snake is sinking its teeth into its own tail. Remember this for the further books in the series, by the way. A name that I have spoken in the middle of the night and in the sunlight, during frosts and heat waves and rain. No, I'm not afraid to speak it now. And he says Yennefer's name, thinking that she is the last one, and tells Death that she should just take his hand. So she steps closer to him, and he feels a cold, but she tells him that no, someday, but not today. But he insists that she has taken everything from him. She denies it. She says, I don't take. I hold hands so that no one has to be alone. And so she bids him farewell, saying, until we meet again, Geralt of Rivia. She turns and disappears, and suddenly a mist engulfs everything. The obelisk, the flowers, Death, and Geralt. The next thing we know is Jurga is waking up Geralt, saying that he was a fool in his state to walk all the way to the memorial hill. He also questions why Geralt even bothered to climb all the way up to the hill. After all, Jurga knows all 14 names. He could have just told them to him. Geralt asks, does Jurga really know every single name? And Jurga says, well, yeah, obviously. And so Geralt asks to tell him the 14th name of the hill. Jurga, slightly amused, says, obviously, that it's Yol Grethen of Carreras. Geralt wipes his eyes with his wrist and looks up at the menhir, and Jurga asks him if he knew him, and Geralt says no. Another day, Jurga and Geralt sit down to talk. The price that Jurga has to offer him, what he finds at home but does not expect. And Geralt refuses, saying that no, actually, he doesn't need anything from Jurga. Just forget. But Jurga insists, believing that it's destiny. If they avoid it, then there will be some sort of punishment. But Jurga reveals that his wife, Goldina Złotolitka, as it is in Polish, she's translated to golden cheeks in English, but frankly, I think that sounds stupid. And it's like a description as much as a name, saying that she's golden, so I think Goldina is perhaps a better translation. But anyway, she can't have children, and so Geralt should not be expecting anything, really, and so he wants to give him something else. So he offers one of his 2 sons that Geralt can train to become a witcher. After all, it's a profession, no worse or no better than any other one, right? But Geralt questions that, well, Jurga says that perhaps having doubts is good. Having doubts is human, after all. Only true evil never doubts. We arrive at a ferry crossing, and at this point we are taking into another embedded narrative, this one with Dandelion. A few years back, this is from the first Nilfgaardian invasion, when Dandelion and Geralt find each other at a ferry crossing as well. He is desperate to escape, but he lost his horse to a horse thief. The ferry is overcrowded, and soldiers are forcibly pushing people off the ferry into the waters. And Dandelion is desperate to get on because the army will burn the ferry after they cross the river, fearing that the Nilfgaardian army would want to use it as well. Geralt dismisses this and just says that it's just another war, you know, kings will eventually negotiate a treaty. But Dandelion says that no, Geralt doesn't understand. This is Nilfgaard. This is a different type of war. There is no negotiating. Geralt says that, well, it's just war. In war, you have atrocities of this kind. But Dandelion says no, that Nilfgaard wants to wipe out the entire world. But Geralt says that makes no sense. Who would want to destroy the world? Wars aren't waged to destroy. Wars are waged for 2 reasons. One is power and the other is money. Don't philosophize, Geralt. You won't change what's happening with philosophy. Why won't you listen? He urges Geralt to go north, but he also pleads with Geralt not to leave him alone, and Geralt says that he's a fool to think that Geralt would leave him behind, because after all, they are best friends. They care for each other in the books. And so they journey upriver, hoping to find another ferry. Dandelion asks where Geralt is going, and Geralt says that after crossing the river, he will journey to Sintra, which Dandelion is super surprised. He says, Sintra? No, there is no Sintra. It has fallen. Aistjursach, the king, fell in battle. Calanthe held out, tried to fight as well, but ultimately she was taken into the city. They barricaded themselves with the nobles inside the palace until the Nilfgaardians came anyway, and nobles inside the palace decided to die by their own hand, with Queen Calanthe leading the charge, jumping from the highest tower in the palace straight onto her head. So Geralt asks about Ciri, Calanthe's granddaughter, who at this point, this flashback is taking taking place a year after the Sword of Destiny short story, and so he estimates that she has to be around 11. But Dandelion knows nothing. Do you believe in destiny, Dandelion? The troubadour raised his head and looked at him with his eyes wide open. Why do you ask? Answer. Well, yes. But did you know that destiny alone is not enough? That something more is necessary? I don't understand. You're not the only one, but that's how it is. Something more is needed. The problem is that now I'll never find out what. Breaks my heart, but it also shows you the state at which Geralt is in when he walks up to the obelisk. He thinks that Ciri is dead. He thinks that Yennefer is dead. And so that's why he tells Death that she took everyone from him. And so she might as well take him as well. So Geralt and Dandelion continue on, and Geralt says that, well, they need to find a bigger boat because he's not leaving Roach behind on this side of the river, and that he doesn't need to go to Sintra anymore. In the final chapter of The Sword of Destiny, Jurga and Geralt arrive at Jurga's house. Jurga finally is reunited with his wife. Goldina is so happy to see him, and Jurga is so happy to be home. But that's when Goldina sees Geralt, the Witcher, and she's very disturbed. Jurga says that he'll explain everything later, and that Geralt was instrumental to his survival. Jurga asks about their children, and Goldina says that they are happy and healthy. But then she surprises Jurga by mentioning that there's a third child. She took home a girl from the Druids who were saving little orphans from after the war. Whenever Goldina asks her where she came from, the girl won't stop crying. Just then, Jurga's two sons rush forward to him, and from behind them, there's the little girl. She's a small, slender one with ashen hair. She looks at him with her large green eyes, and she dashes forward, screaming Geralt's name. They came together in the center of the farmyard, the mousy-haired girl in a gray dress, and the white-haired Witcher with a sword on his back, all dressed in black leather gleaming with silver. The Witcher bounding softly, the girl trotting, the Witcher on his knees, the girl's thin hands around his neck, the mousy hair on his shoulders. Geralt, you found me. I knew you would. I always knew. Ciri, said the Witcher. You found me. Oh, Geralt, I was waiting all this time for so very long. We'll be together now, won't we? Now we'll be together. Say it, Geralt. Forever? Forever, Ciri. It's like they said, Geralt. Am I your destiny? Say it. Am I your destiny? Jurga saw the Witcher's eyes and was very astonished. He looked at the Witcher and waited, tensed, for his answer. He knew he would not understand it, but he waited for it, and he heard it. There's something more, Ciri. Something more. And just like that, we have the missing piece of the puzzle. Our something more. I think that this scene is one of the most beautiful endings to a book ever, as evidenced by the tears on my page. Something that's interesting in that final description of Jurga waiting for Geralt's answer is that it says, wiedział, że nie zrozumie tej odpowiedzi, ale czekał na nią I doczekał się. So Sapkowski is using two different words for the word to wait. So first it says czekał na odpowiedź, which indicates that it's a progressive action, that it's still happening. But then the second word is doczekał, which indicates a finality. And I think that is very poetic because it kind of plays into this idea that something was beginning and now something has ended. And of course, this is just talking about him waiting for Geralt's answer, but it's also in this metatextual way shows us this finality at the end of this short story. And not only is this the ending of the short story Something More, Coś Więcej, it is the end of the anthologies. The next book, Blood of Elves, is book 1 of the Witcher saga, the Pentateuch. I think that this book is absolutely beautiful. Are there some things that don't work for me? Sure. Like I already mentioned, the treatment of Thea and Vea, I'm not really too sure what to make of. Something that I didn't mention earlier was in A Little Sacrifice, there's so much focus on Shinaz's boobs. It's kind of unnecessary, but I mean, I don't know. I guess fish boobs are really enticing. But other than that, it's a beautiful, beautiful story that's so layered. By the end of it, not only do you love Geralt, but you're also fascinated by Yennefer, and you feel so much for Ciri. You also know the world building, you know the war that happened a year ago, you've seen the destruction of that. And it's so important because people say, oh yeah, no, the short stories aren't part of the series. They are. If you go into book 3, there's so much that you don't know. Most of the character development between Geralt and Yennefer is done in these 2 books, especially in this book. I just really get triggered when people say, oh, it's not part of the main series. It is. It's not part of the saga, it's part of the series. But the saga is just a subsect of the series. The only things that are optional are Season of Storms and Crossroads of Ravens. That's all from me. Thank you so much for watching till the end of the video. And to let me know that you did, put a green heart in the comment section. You know, the color of Ciri's eyes. Let me know if you enjoyed this book. Do you like it more or less than The Last Wish? Other than that, that's all from me. And I'll see you later in another video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye!